Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third budget deliberation for the 21-22 budget for the RCSD school year. Up first is actually Dr. Sean Nelms. So he is going to be presenting on East and their budget, and followed by the school chiefs, and they will be presenting on their schools. So Sean, I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron, and thanks for being flexible tonight. I appreciate it with the agenda. Yeah. Tonight is I'm going to review some of the slides that we discussed previously. I also want to thank those who submitted questions in the question log. I hope I answered those thoroughly. And if there are questions tonight, I'm going to be joined by CFO Colleen Pierce to ask some of the budget-related questions, especially as we relate to items being moved within the budget book itself. So I have truncated the presentation to keep it relatively short and sweet. And again, this is just a recap of what we presented to the board previously for those in the community who may have missed it. I know that every board member was in attendance for the original presentation. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that the EPO budget for the 21-22 school year was approved as part of the EPO agreement last year. And what we have done, we will continue to do, is to seek opportunities to reduce its budget while also staying steadfast to the instructional outcomes and goals that we have aligned in our EPO plan that was shared with the state, approved by the state, as well as the school board this past year. Many of those programs that are highlighted within our budget focus on the freshman academy. We know that when students make it from 9th to 10th grade with the right credits, and the right type of support, that they're much more likely to graduate. This is research that's been proven across the country, that was studied extensively at the University of Chicago, and we continue to adopt and adapt that framework at East. And we've seen our graduation rate move from the 29% before the EPO to a 78% graduation rate last year. We anticipate that graduation rate to be somewhere between 75 and 82% for the upcoming school year. I know that was a question that was asked by Commissioner Elliott at a previous board meeting. This budget continues to support establishing and sustaining a literacy-rich environment. We must be honest that COVID, with all of our efforts and with all the hard work from teachers and staff and administrators, there are many students who were not successful in a hybrid model. And we would be dishonest with ourselves if we thought that to be true. Now, there were some students who benefited from the hybrid model, but the vast majority of students need to get back. And so this budget also funds us revamping and reestablishing the rigor that we had before COVID to ensure that our students who have experienced remote learning the last year and a half get back on track. That means we have to, at the same time we are focusing on enrichment and acceleration, we have to focus on some remediation as well, and to address some of that learning that has not been acquired due to the pandemic. But again, teachers, administrators, and community and parents did all they could to ensure that would continue. Professional learning has been a huge emphasis. As this board knows, we actually created a center, the Technical Assistance Center at East, where we can not only have robust professional learning opportunities, but to record them and to share them more broadly. It was also designed because of our extensive work with the curricular development, and we will continue to develop that and to revise that work also. This budget maintains that and reestablishes it at the scale that it was prior to COVID and prior to our budget cuts due to last year's fiscal need. We are doubling down on the importance of culturally sustaining environments. We know even in some of our local news that there are districts who are suffering with understanding the importance of culturally relevant and sustaining pedagogy. As I think you all realize, RCSD East has been supporting other districts as they make sense of this work, and we will continue to do that, not just for East, but for schools across the region, in making sure that the work that represents the contributions of folks who are omitted from the history books are now embedded in those and become part of our core curriculum, and not treated as ancillary pedagogy. And last but certainly not least, we are extending and expanding the number of students with disabilities who attend East. I know we've talked about this at the last few years with the board and with the state, There were two major factors that led to that decrease. First is that the vast majority of students who did not graduate or had dropped out, remember it was a 52% dropout rate our first year at East before we came. Many of those students were students with disabilities. And so when we actually cleaned our books, we realized that many of the students who had not attended for 2, 3, in some cases 4 years were students with disabilities. We also were operating in 2/3 of the building due to the capital improvement project. That project concludes this summer, so we will get back the space that we haven't had in our 5 years at East. And so we're able to not only take more students with disabilities, but more students overall. And we're going to be working with the district and ACI and the other departments to try to continue to create a pipeline for students to take advantage of the 6 wonderful CTE programs that we have at East. We can only do that by expanding the number of students that we have, but also being aligned and vertically pre-K through 12 to ensure that all students who want to enter our programs like teaching and learning have the opportunity to do so. And it's not just open for students at East. So we will increase the number of students who can enter at 9th grade, and we're increasing the number of students who can enter at 7th grade, which is our 2 natural entry points. We're going to also look to maintain 6th grade because we know the earlier that we get our kids, the more successful they tend to be. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. I talked through the special education program and why that continues. I really want to thank the leadership of the RCSD Chief of Special Education, Desiree Richmond. She has done a phenomenal job coming in this year. She's a great pick, Dr. Myers. She comes with a wealth of knowledge, wealth of experience, and she understands systems, structures, and support in ways that allow us to think not just in the short term, but long-term impact of expanding our services throughout all of our buildings. So I want to publicly thank her for her work. And she has been critical in helping us think through how to be thoughtful over the next few years with our students with disabilities and the programming that they deserve. Next slide. This is just a quick illustration of the budgetary impact. With any program that you implement, you have to be thoughtful and strategic in the funding. So although I'm able to reduce our budget this year by 8%, I anticipate over the next few years that 8% will be consumed with not only salary increases, we know we have some pending contracts, but also to fully staff the program so that we aren't looking at the last minute trying to fit people into a program for student disabilities, but they're at the center of our thinking programmatically. And so by giving a budget that takes us out to the 22-23 school year allows us to be thoughtful and strategic in our spending and in our planning. And then what you see in the blue are all the teachers and supports that will be needed as we gradually grow out. And I think this is a model that I've used in previous districts. Anytime you introduce a program, you have to budget it out minimally 3 years so what the cost will be, but also think about what are some of the impacts of other programs that may be decreasing as you expand, so you can kind of play within your own budget, but also prepare for anticipated increases in the future. Next. And again, just to reiterate, this budget does not take anything away from our kids or our staff. It's just we are going to be, refocusing our efforts. For those who've been on this journey with us for the last 5, now 6 years, that we have sent less kids to summer school because they've been academically successful. We have had less retention, meaning kids are retained the next year, which means we don't have to hire teachers for retention. We've had more kids graduating, again, from 29% the previous year before we started to 78%, means there's less kids, so you're holding on for years 5, 6, and 7. So as our kids are successful, we're able to repurpose those funds into the areas that we know has led to that transformation. Again, literacy development, grades 6 through 9, numeracy development, grades 6 through 9, a focus on student culture and climate through social emotional learning and trauma. We know we have a robust program there. And we have, with each of our interventions, there's actually curriculum that goes with each. So it's not a matter of just hiring more teachers or hiring more counselors, but really focusing on the technical work that will be done with those hires and making sure that we're consistent across the board. So no matter who a kid goes to, and no matter what teacher or support staff member that they lean into, that the answer will be consistent, it will be held to a standard, and that all of our teachers, students, staff, parents, and community will benefit equally. And I believe this is just, you all know, I've been saying this for 5 years now, our curriculum is our contract with our community. It's our moral contract. What's not in the curriculum is a statement within itself, and what's in it, sends a strong message for what we value. And so we will continue to focus on building a guaranteed and viable curriculum. We will continue to make sure this is supported across all content areas, not just English and math, but every content area, and that we are intentional in how we prepare our students to become independent thinkers. This is about preparing kids for college, career, life, etc. This is not just about their livelihood at East, but really making sure that they are prepared to be successful contributing members to our society in ways that transform issues around inequities and their own personal growth, but also the growth of their families and those that they want to support in their community. Next. So curriculum is one part of that triangle. You also have instructional priorities. It's one thing to have the blueprint, but how do you get it from paper to teachers to kids, and from kids back to teachers? That's the instructional priorities. We'll continue to focus there to make sure that's high quality. And I've shared in the past our work, and I think that it is something that we can think about as we receive additional funds from the state and federal government, and how we address the curricular and instructional priorities, but also how we assess the learning. What we know about students, their interests, their readiness, and their learning profiles will dictate how successful we are academically in supporting their needs. Next slide. And then this center, as I mentioned earlier, for those who were back East in the past, it's the old forum room of the small auditorium. It's now a state-of-the-art facility that is used to have robust professional learning, to record the professional learning. And this is one of those return of investments that we talked about in the first year of East. What will East give to us? What will the university give to us at the end of this project? I would say that the curriculum is probably the most expensive thing that we next to staffing and personnel. We often spend a lot of money on professional learning and a lot of money on curriculum and school systems. And often it's a program or it's not sustained. When people create curriculum and co-construct that work, it becomes their own work. There's a different level of ownership. And I believe that the work that we've done at East with our chief academic officer and our teachers and our staff will provide an opportunity for the Technical Assistance Center to be transformative, not just for East teachers, but for teachers throughout the district and throughout the county. And I look forward to doing that. And I know you've seen some of the resources in the past, like Elevated Educator, that's focused squarely on cultural response and sustaining pedagogy, as well as some of the hard copies and digital copies of the work that we're doing. So I'm looking forward to expanding that with this budget and to continue to maintain that as a focus moving forward. So in summary, this is the budget reductions. We have our planned budget for $22 million. We are reducing it by 8.2%, a little less reduction than we had the previous year. And we have to do a lot of catching up as we spoke about, and we plan to do that with this budget. This budget includes the salary and benefit and cost of living increases, part of contracts. We're going to continue to monitor our master schedule. The new contract negotiations will have an impact on our budget. We'll continue to monitor that also. And I think it's also important to note that our budget for the 21-22 school year is less than it was for the 2015-16 school year. So we have maintained within all those factors a budget that is fiscally responsible and that meets the needs of our students, staff, and this community. And I look forward to the board considering this budget and for us to continue to move the needle at East and among all the schools within the RCSD. Thank you. That's good, Callie. It's just our historic savings. I shared this before with the board, that if you look at every year of that chart, you'll see the overall savings at East. Since our inception, we have returned to the district about $29.5 million by being efficient in our spending, by taking advantage of grants, and with the support of the University of Rochester. So I want to thank everyone who supported the East up to this point, and I hope you continue to consider those changes in your deliberation, even though the budget was approved last year. The budget that was approved last year was for the duration of the EPO, but I think it's important to give those updates as well. Thank you, Kalia.
Thanks, John. I'm going to take questions now for you, and then just so everyone's aware, Dr. Nelms will have to step out after this portion of Q&A. His daughter has a game, and we want to support that. So just as an FYI, if there are additional questions, I'll just remind the board that this Thursday, is the final round of questions. So I'm going to call on Commissioner Powell and then Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, Sean, can you explain your thought process as you described that there's going to be space opened up because of completion of construction for the first time, essentially, since the EPO started, which means you could take on a lot more students. Rather than presenting us with a decreased budget, you could present us with a budget that allows for increased capacity. Can you describe to us your thought process on that? Is there just not a district-wide need for more seats, or what was your process?
No, so I thank you for that. That's a great question. So two things. We actually took more kids this year. So we anticipated being open before COVID. So we already had those kids in, which was easier because we were distance learning. So we didn't actually feel them in the presence of the building. When we originally had the EPO, we wanted 160 kids per grade level at grades 6, 7, 8, and then 180 at grades 9, 10, 11, 12. We know that sixth grade never hit the 160 mark because of the natural feeder pattern, which we thought would be low when we first started. And so this past year, we increased the number of students in seventh grade to increase up to 200. And for ninth grade, we sought to increase it up to around 200 or more. So we started that process already. And the idea is just to gradually grow that out so that we can, in 4 years, have a school that we have kids who've gone through this process for 4 years, and we continue to expand at that time. What we know historically in large settings is that when you make really quick changes in enrollment with a lot of kids at the same time, and not being able to support them academically, particularly in the earlier grades, that we know those schools typically don't do well historically. So it was intentional to gradually grow down because of the building size and gradually grow back up, knowing that the construction will be done at the end of this school year. And the intent, of course, our job is to fill the school. But I think it has to be thoughtful and strategic and aligned with the school choice process. I'm hoping that we can create a pipeline, as I said earlier, for students who want to have and take advantage of programs that are offered throughout the district. So like mechanics at Edison, in our case, we have optics, we have teaching, we have culinary, we have health care professions, IT, precision manufacturing. So we're hoping that we can identify kids in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade across the district who want to come in 9th grade to be part of East, but also take advantage of those programs. So I do see us growing out and taking on more kids. I think it has to be strategic and it has to be coordinated with placement, and so we can match the staffing with the students and the programs. And I just want to say to Dr. Chris Miller, to his credit, he's already having those discussions. I know he had a conversation with our Teaching and Learning Institute teachers within the last week where he's talking about that pipeline. So again, I don't want people to think this is happening in isolation. There are people from Dr. Meyer Small's team that are already leaning in and trying to coordinate. And again, that's something that has not happened in the past also.
Thank you.
Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate you on your increased graduation rate and the increased average daily attendance rate. But one of the questions I'm going to ask you, I could probably ask all night, but in your case, it's a little different. And that is the student-teacher ratio. I noticed at East, it's 7-to-1. And last year, I think it was like 6.9-to-1. Now, is that part of the EPO model? Because I know we're looking for things we can replicate throughout the district. And I know our independent monitors was looking at more of and I don't even want to bring up what's in the contract, but is that the ratio that makes this all work would be my first question.
I would say that, I would not say that the ratio does not help, but it does not make it work. So we know that, in the past, we've hired, for example, there was a large number of reading teachers that were hired for the district, prior administrations. And, but there was a reading program and no structure for them once they arrived. And I would say that if we just hire staff members at East just to fill bodies without having a structure, it would not happen. So The reason why I focus so heavily on curriculum, instruction, and structures, and I think East represented an opportunity to create a structure with teachers and with families and with communities. I think that's the difference. Quite frankly, we have reduced that. We have increased that ratio from year one because we have needed less teachers. Where we see a large number of our staff, where people may excuse the ratio a little bit, is we increase the number of social workers and counselors year one because of the need that our families said they needed in support. We increased the number of reading teachers. The previous year at East, when we were there was no reading teachers, and we had 1% of our kids scoring a 3 or 4 in the state assessments. So we hired enough reading teachers to really focus in grades 6 through 9. You'll see administratively, we have 2 administrators at 9th grade. As I spoke earlier, we know that if kids don't make it past 9th grade, that you might have class sizes of 25 in 9th grade and class sizes of 6 in 12th grade. Right. So it's really a matter of knowing your master schedule and shifting individuals to where the needs are. So I would say, yes, of course, I think a smaller student to teacher ratio works, but that ratio doesn't mean you have 7 kids in a classroom with 1 teacher. You have teachers who are, it's really in mental health support, it's in reading support. That's what primarily fits for us. And we have a support model. By extending our day an extra hour as part of our contract, we have where kids might get 4 extra periods a week or 5 extra periods a week of like small group instruction, tutoring from teachers, because parents said year one that when the kids went home with the biology or chemistry work, they weren't able to help them. So we built that into the schedule. So it's not up to a kid to get that learning on their own at home. They would get it before they leave the school. Anything after school would be an extra support, not things they're learning for the first time. So yes, I would say smaller ratios work, but only if there are structures and systems in place for the use of those individuals that are hired. And it has to be strategic and purposeful with curriculum, with direction, and with a sense of accountability so that you can monitor and adjust and shift those positions as needed.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was relatively, it's a small question, but when I saw the contingency fund, and I know it's only 47,000, down from 50,000, but I know the 0 was spent last year. And basically, I know it's for contingencies, but what is it for really, if it's something that you're not really using?
Well, last year was just difficult because we had COVID and there was something we moved. So what I tried to do 2 years ago, Bill, is put a lot of those funds right into the lower school and upper school budgets. For example, when COVID hit, we already had the vast majority of our kids had Chromebooks because we do 1-to-1, 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. And so we had to deploy them, but then I had to buy a bunch of extra Chromebooks anticipating that some might come back broken. So the contingencies that are being used for that is relatively a small amount when you think about what could happen. Unfortunately, there are things that happen at East with the infrastructure that we've had to pay for in the past too. For example, we used some of that funding for more security tags on doors. We had a big campus, not a lot of security, so we have to be able to monitor it. So we also put more cameras in the past. We've used it for things that we upgraded the water fountains, so they have the ones where you put the bottle in, so you can drink water when you're in the school. So those funds are used for those type of situations, but it's a relatively small amount considering the total budget and the size of the school. But again, I think what it speaks to is that if we don't need it, we don't use it, and then it goes back to the district at the end of the year. And even that process we've changed. We used to the former one superintendent wanted us to kind of keep it to the end of the year. Another superintendent said, give it at the beginning of the year. I'd much rather get it out of my budget. And so we've stopped, doing it at the end of the year. So our return to the district is much smaller than it has been in the past because we cut it out of our budget to start with. So you'll see some line items not be used. And I'm just not one person to say there's a dollar amount there. We better use it because it's available. I'd much rather return it to the district as part of their reserves. And I was committed to that with each superintendent, that I would be frugal so that I can, make sure that funds return to the district and can be used in other ways.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. Dr. Nelms, I'm just wondering what percentage of students at East are being drawn from their surrounding neighborhoods? I'm interested to know more, and perhaps you can't answer that there or here tonight, but I am interested to know the percentages of students coming from some of the surrounding feeder schools. I know there had originally been a plan to get students from School 33 incorporated into the building, and I'm wondering how that process is going.
Yes, Commissioner Loy. So when we first began, we had at East, the surrounding areas or the catchment area, we had about 5% of the students attending East from our area. And last year, that number was around between 35 and 40%. So what we know is that the community has embraced the school. Our partnership with School 33 is the only other school in the Beechwood area. So there's East and there's East. There are other schools that are closer to East, like 29, some other schools, but those are two schools that are in the catchment area and where we draw from. We also, in year, I think 3, we paid some parents in a partnership with Connected Communities to go out and to talk to parents about the importance of community schools and neighborhood schools. And that also helped with our recruitment efforts also. So it was the parents and community members going to the community along with our East staff talking about East. So they understood what the benefits were. We created some safe passage. At one point we worked with transportation to set up some like universal bus stops when it was really cold so that kids didn't have to walk, all the way. We used some grant funds for that. So we've really been intentional in trying to recruit from the neighborhood. Our long-term plan, to be quite honest, is to have East open in the evening as a medical site for parents and communities and parents and kids living in the community. I'm already working with that with the University of Rochester. As you know, we have 2 dental chairs at East already. We have a full functioning health clinic there. And so we're looking at using that space in the building. We did the reconstruction. I designed it so you can cordon off that part of the building and it's next to a door so that we can have some like urgent care. What I came to understand and realize is that there are no urgent cares within the city. They're all in the suburbs. And so what you see in large districts like New York City is schools, they are that central point for healthcare. So I'm hoping that people understand that neighborhood is defined by your geographic area, but I also want to bring the community resources to a neighborhood school so that it's a one-stop shop for our parents, our community. And I think that's leading to more and more students at East. In fact, about 70% of our students at East in the upper school actually use our healthcare facility as their primary care physician. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I want to make sure that that the board and the community understands that when you move from 5 to 35%, it's not by chance. We really did the work in getting into the community so that parents felt having trust with us and that we would take care of their babies.
Okay, so just to clarify, you went from 5 years ago having 5% from the local neighborhood area, that was 5 years ago, to having 35 to 40%?
40%, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Got to ask the tough question, Dr. Nelms. I just don't see this model as being sustainable. So how do we continue with those kinds of results with a model that may not be sustainable? Because even at $20 million is a lot. There are some schools, Monroe is one, that's getting results at about $10 million. So what do you suggest that we do in the future? Because I just don't see this model as being sustainable. You've heard me say this before. And when we did this originally, I was out on sick leave, so I didn't pay as close of attention to it. But I think if I would have had the decision back then, I would have voted no. So how do we maintain this model, given that we're in a crisis financially? How do we continue it? And I know that there are good results being, that we're getting those good results. But the fact of the matter is that over time, we're not going to be able to sustain it. How do you respond to that, Dr. Nelms?
I think it's a great question. I've been asked that question many times. So, and I've had that conversation too. So thank you for not just saying it publicly. You have that conversation with me privately. So I really appreciate that. That's important. So a few things. One, I would say, when people ask, can this be replicated? My answer is no. And I also say, nor should it be. Like, this plan was designed for East. So it was their context. East was at 29% graduation rate. It was the lowest school in the district at the time, the lowest school in the state in terms of graduation rate. So this plan was designed for them. I think the question that I like to have the conversation is what is it about East that can be replicated? and that can be used, and how do you maximize your return on investment? So I've talked about the curriculum piece. Our curriculum is solid, and it's being picked up in districts throughout the country right now. People want it, they're getting copies of it all the time. It should be something that we consider here, if that's desired. We've been pushing that for the last 6 years. Our focus on professional development for our administrators, I think if you ask our teachers, we've had no grievances in 6 years, and our teacher and administrative relationships are sometimes tense and tough, but they're productive because we are anchored into the work. We're not arguing about things that are subjective. We're really focusing on what we agree to. So our distributed leadership model around instructional leadership is I think is great and top notch, and we should be leaning into that. Those two things cost little to nothing that could spread. Another return on investment that I believe is important is our focus on professional learning and teacher leadership. We know that if teachers are co-constructing the lessons and they're being supported, that they're much more able to help their colleagues be better instructors than an administrator coming in and observing 3 times a year, writing up a report. So we're really talking about school transformation in a way that changes our mindset about how we function as a system. We have reduced our budget over the years. We have been clear with the board around some of the budgetary issues that we've had in the past and the way in which East was calculated. The whole idea of budgeting on average versus actual is problematic. The idea, I've mentioned that in the past. And to be quite honest, we really haven't seen what the cost of each school is across the district in my 6 years. So I would love to kind of really get an idea of what the actual cost is from school to school and how that's calculated. And that's something that the state commissioner asked us to do before Dr. Meyer Smalls is here, so it's not on her watch. But those are big conversations. As a board member, you should be asking those questions. I do not think that East, where it was in year 1, should be funded like that in year 10. I think there should be a reduction of the cost and investment, especially as more kids do better and graduate. I completely agree with that. And I think that would be a great opportunity for the board and for the U of R to sit down and talk about the cost of the program, the cost of the project, and to have a deep conversation about that before considering any extension to the EPO. I think that would be more than appropriate for the board to do and for the university to be able to speak to that because they are the ones who are the receiver. I'm not.
Can we do this? Can we do the program on $10 or $12 million?
I think the question you would have to ask is, what do you want to take out of the program? So when we ran the program at that amount, we had a 29% graduation rate. So it's really the cost of you. I mean, that's not being sarcastic at all, Mr. Elliott. What I'm saying to the community, and again, you and I had this conversation, is we really have to figure out, like, starting with the dollar amount, what's the standard that we want to establish, and how do we get to that standard? And I don't think a dollar amount, like X amount, will guarantee this type of outcome. But I do think calling into question the price, the cost of any school is important, East or whatever school. I also think calling into question the price of kids not graduating is a conversation we have to have. I could say if I spent $15 million a year and I had a 29% graduation rate, or $20 million a year had a 79 or 80% graduation rate, I don't know which one the board would prefer, or the community would prefer, right? One would be financially driven, and one would be outcome driven. So I'm just saying there are bigger conversations we have to have, and your question is fair. It's always been fair, but I've also heard you talk a lot about the systems and structures that go along with those dollars. Now, what I've tried to do to this board and to the community is to demonstrate that with every dollar, there is a standard, a rigorous outcome, and there's accountability. And I think we should start there with the conversation and then match the dollars to it. I always think there's 2 ways to budget. You can put the money and then match the programs, or you build the programs and then you find the money. And I much prefer finding the programs that work for kids and then talking about how the money is going to support it. Because when you do that, there's things that we've done at East that we've eliminated. You know, we've eliminated a nice chunk of contracts. We've eliminated other spending because it wasn't matching our intended results. And I think it forced you to ask a different question and to respond differently when you start with programs and not the budget.
Are you all set, Vice President Elliott?
I am. Thank you, Dr. Nelms.
Dr. Meyer Smalls?
Sure. I certainly appreciate that question, Vice President Elliott, and Sean, I appreciate the response. But one of the things that is a reality in the Rochester City School District is that there is comparison between East and the other programs. And that's something that has caused cognitive dissonance and really has caused tension within the district, because the flip side of this, though, is that, it's being communicated with me and others on my team. Why aren't we funded at the same levels that East is? And many of our schools do feel like that, and I'm constantly explaining this is a different situation. Look at where East started, look at where they are now. And it's a different structure with the superintendent over it. And I'm not over that program. But I think we do need to certainly, as you said, look at how each one of our schools are funded. I certainly concur and agree with you that we need to make sure that we look at how we're structuring and the programs that we have serving our students. But the glaring elephant that continues to be in the room is that our other schools are not funded to the same extent. And this is an agreement that was made between the then board and the University of Rochester. But that is a point of continual tension in our district. And we've got to figure out, you and I have a good working relationship and we work to try and make sure that we're on the same page. But there are many people still in our school community that don't get that and don't understand that it is a different situation. And so, I've just been thinking about this as the question has been called more often. As of this past week, I've received multiple emails or had conversations. We've got to figure out how to communicate that out because it is not understood in our school community.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Sean, did you want to respond?
Honestly, so thank you, Dr. Meyer. I've never had, we've never had a conversation. I've never had a superintendent comment on my budget, nor do I comment on theirs. So that's kind of new to me. But I think to your point, we should look at all the programs and how all the funding is going across the district. And I think that's an opportunity for me and Leslie to sit together and look at all the schools, because I know that in the past, and when we looked at budgeting, there were a large number of dollars that were spent on non-academic or instructional things that perhaps should have been spent in schools that were not, that were above, that were not under my control. And I just reminded the school community and the board and those on this call that the purpose of receivership was really to insulate the model from outside influence, if you will. And that's because things were not going well. And I would say, again, imagine if I had to negotiate this my 6 years here at East, I would have negotiated our project with 6 different superintendents. So I mean, the whole idea was to insulate it in a way to show a proof point. And I am very sensitive to the fact that there are folks who, throughout the district who have an issue or questions about East. But I also say, the previous superintendents did not do a good job of explaining it. And quite frankly, they often cause friction intentionally as a distraction point. And as Dan Loengard once said, why am I spending 99% of my time on 1% of the budget? When I have 99% of my budget, I should be thinking about fixing the rest of the schools. And I've always focused on that also. So I do think that, the curriculum, for example, has never been shared widely with the rest of the school district. I think that's a problem. The instructional model has never been shared widely with the rest of the school district. That's been a problem. The way in which we match our schedule has never been shared with the rest of the district. That's been a problem. The way that we've engaged our parents and our community and being thought partners and leaders in our work and making decisions with our finance has never been shared with the rest of the district. And that's a problem. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I would say, I think part of the dissent between some folks in the discourse is that, to Dr. Meyer-Small's point, people just don't know. And so the way in which we have to explain this to other schools, so they understand the value of it and how to leverage it for themselves becomes critical. More importantly, if we have a district that understands what it takes to educate our kids to a standard, we're better able to articulate and advocate for that at the state level collectively. Simply asking for money without a structure or program has never worked. And so we have this unique opportunity with a lot of money coming into the system to decide what is it about East that we want to replicate that could be short-term and long-term, and how do we do that? How do we do it in ways that create sustained growth? Or, we will get the same point year after year with people saying they got more, they got less. And I just think that's the wrong conversation. We have to get people to focus on programs and systems and structures. If we do that, I think the conversation will change. And I'll continue to offer our services. I'll continue to ask for support from the district also. And I think when we get to a point where that's shared, and we see some examples of that, evidence of that now, I just saw, I think the social studies director just got the 6 through 12 curriculum recently. Once that starts getting shared and people see the value of the work, I think those conversations will become less and less voiced. I really believe that. So I hope that we can commit to that over the next few years so that people understand what's really happening and not what they were told by previous administrations to create distraction. And I'm taking some chance in saying that, but that's just the truth.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to take a look back at when we started to work on East. That was a one school thing, and now we're comparing it to how it would look if we did it to all the schools. East wouldn't be what's, maybe we need to look at focusing on one school at a time, maybe Edison right now. Let's just work on Edison. That's the realistic. And we have to be optimistic. There's other universities that we can reach out to and get support from. Quit doubting what's possible. We just got our foundation aid. We just got weed approved. Derek Chauvin got convicted today. Let's quit believing stuff ain't possible. Lately, stuff has been being possible. And that's what I'm just saying. We have to be a little more, we have to reimagine some stuff and just try to uplift the other schools. We don't want to need to bring a school down. We may, even if we only do it one school at a time. And I say, let that be Edison. That's the big school that could use our support. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. I do have a couple of comments, Sean. So first and foremost, it is my understanding that the extension was only an additional 3 years. I would like to start having conversations about what that transition plan will look like as we go into a new budget year. So my understanding, July 1, we're talking 2 years out before the board has to have those conversations again, but it was my understanding that the state also gave some input that this would be the 3-year transition for us to transfer over to. The other piece, I know you just mentioned that no other previous superintendent had commented on the budget. I do recall that our previous superintendent did have comments on the budget and that did not originally go over well. And there was some push from the board to have you and them and some mediation to have conversations, but there has been comments before. It's just, it's not something that has been viewed, I guess, by East, the EPO and yourself as something that this superintendent currently would have a right to or the previous. But I do want to uplift a couple of things that when we start talking about graduation rates and the cost for schools. Northeast, Northwest, Monroe, All City, which is a program, but certainly has students from all of our high schools who are no longer there in our transition to that program. Early College, Soda, School Without Walls. These are all schools currently in the district that have high graduation rates, so equal in some circumstances above. And so I would argue that there are models besides the East model within the district that exists that will get us to graduation rates, and certainly at a much lower cost. I know that we're about to get foundation aid and people are hammering as to all the things that we can do, but realistically, we still have a declining student population. So my goal is for us to really align our expenditures with our actual enrollment numbers so that we're not going after these models that we can't replicate. And I use the word models intentionally at this point because for the last 3 years, I have argued that East is not a model that can be fiscally replicated within the district. And I've had pushback from some of my colleagues, and particularly President White, who said, this is a model and we're gonna replicate it. It's not replicable. But I also wanna focus on the ELA and math and the percentages that exist within that context to the rest of our high schools. Because for a long time, the district has only focused on just graduating students with very little conversations around ELA and math scores and what those percentages mean. And so I don't think that there is a question for you to answer tonight on this, Sean, but I do have a request to Commissioner Vice President Elliott that we have some conversations around the ELA and math scores and the alignment of the academic plan for East as well to the rest of the school district. And I know that she's in charge of putting together the focus for the board on ELA and math in particular, and our academic plans with the state monitor and Dr. Leslie Meyer's small strategic plan. But I just realized that I don't know if we have an alignment for ELA and math scores for East with both of those plans. And so that's going to be my request tonight, and also that we start having conversations around a transition plan. Thank you.
I'll answer just two things, 2 points of clarity. One is, thank you for your question, Commissioner LeBron. We actually added the ELA and math historical data and current data to Thursday's board meeting, the business meeting. So it's there. And there's a slide that shows the results for schools in receivership. We get ranked on the growth between 2, 3s, and 4s. And so we'll show you, it's a color chart that we've shared in the past, but it'll show you the historic data for that also, so you can see how that relates. And if you want, I can tie some of the specific academic programs to that growth also. In talking about structure. The other part for clarity around the EPO is last year the board approved an up to 5-year. I've been with Commissioner Willa stressing the up to language. It's up to 5 years, and the state is at 3. So it's 2 more years with the state, up to 2 more years of state, up to 4 more years with the district, and that all has to be negotiated. So nothing about that is etched in stone. That's why we emphasize the up to. Again, at the end of the day, I think that the conversation has to take place between whoever the board is at that time. We can, start that conversation by the end of this year. I think that's smart. Also, with the U of R, I can tell you in recent conversations with them and their new president, is they're looking to not only support the continuation of East, but also looking at how we can address some of the socio-emotional and medical needs of kids in the city. Through partnerships. I can tell you that. I just joined the URMC Medical Board to help them think about how to support our community through whole child health. And so that's again, I'm really trying to, regardless of how much time we're there, is to make sure that when EPL steps away, that there are some foundational and structural improvements to the community and some alignment with the district that will continue far beyond the EPO model or far beyond East. Far beyond me. And so I'm looking to partner, hopefully the next few years, partnering with the board, Dr. Meyer Small, her team, and local communities to really do that work. That's really what my focus is right now. But yeah, there's definitely some more work to do in terms of deciding after the 2 years with the state. Do we go back to them? Do the U of R go back to them and ask for additional years? Do we do that with the school board? I think those are really interesting conversations we have to have, and I agree that this probably should start having those conversations sooner than later. Those conversations should be considered in negotiations with bargaining units, because some of those things might be time sensitive. I think there's a bigger question. If East goes away, then what happens to the program and success? How does it transition back? Thanks for using that word, transition. How does it transition back into whatever school the district will decide at that point? And are they transitioning it back into a place where it's going to be unsuccessful or successful? I believe it'll be successful. To what degree, we'll have to wait and see. But I think everyone's points are valid, and I think there are things to consider, and I appreciate the way in which they were delivered, and I'll continue to focus and think about that. So thank you, Commissioner LeBron.
Sean, thank you. I just want to emphasize that my focus is that it is not just transitioned, right? And we don't have a plan and then it's set up for failure, because then we would have wasted all of these years putting all of this amount of money and work and effort to then have it just not move forward. So I certainly want to have those conversations starting July 1. And Shelley, I'm looking to you on my screen because Shelley is with the state, and perhaps we can leverage that relationship with having a state appointed monitor to start uplifting those conversations at the state level, so that we have a real transition plan that everyone's involved in and that we can all agree with. President White.
Yes, just wanted to provide some clarity. And Sean has done that largely already. There wasn't an understanding that it would end in 3 years. The understanding was the state said while the district may want it to go on longer, we are not willing to give that kind of extension. And so the extension was limited, and not as far as the district's, the board's contractual extension. So that all has to be discussed and negotiated. And this is actually a good way to begin those conversations. You know, we're looking at numbers, graduation rates, but we're also looking at ELA and math scores of all our schools. It has been said, even today, that I called for the replication of the East model. What I have called for repeatedly is replication of best practices. This district has an abysmal record for replicating what works. And oftentimes what this district has done is we destroy what works. So it wasn't so much that I would say, oh, it's the only model we should replicate. Those of you who've been around a while, at least been paying attention, you know that I called for the replication of SOTA. My belief is that we should replicate practices that work. And they don't have to be exact clones. I've never called for the cloning of East, but I have called for the replication of successful models. And we have others. SOTA, School Without Walls. I've repeatedly called for the replication or the expansion of the consortium model, which is, as you all know, is School Without Walls. So I'm not a guy who's sitting here saying, hey, let's just replicate East. I'm saying give our students the same smorgasbord of opportunities that they have in the suburbs, good schools. We should not eliminate East because it is too expensive. Are our children any less valuable than the students in the suburbs that get money hands over fist because they're adequately resourced? So I'm down for replication of any model that works, including SOTA, School Without Walls. If Monroe continues to provide that kind of track record for increased graduation rates, whatever the schools are, I think we should replicate them. The only other thing that I would note is when you talk about schools that are successful, your longitudinal study, your assessment of them can't just be over the last year. Certainly over the last year, you can't just look at a school that had increased graduation rates over the last year or two. The last year might have been impacted by the us not having Regents exams. What East shows, and by the way, what SOTA shows and School Without Walls, and there may be other schools, that over the long haul, these schools, these models are successful. So when we make these comparisons about if we're courageous enough and we're adequately funded to replicate schools that work, the assessment in terms of whether they work or not should not just be on 1 or 2 years. It can't be a one-off. It can't be a two-off. What East has shown, what SOTA has shown, what School Without Walls has shown, and there may be others, is that over an extended period of time, they are generating the kind of results that our students are entitled to look into a school building and say, I want to go to that school, but not just East. I want to go to School Without Walls. I want to go to SOTA. I want to go to SOTA 2. I want to go to another school that has some of the same practices at East. I am not dismissive of this foundation aid. I have said to you all that people have fought tooth and nail. Some people literally died waiting for this moment where the state would step up to the plate and take responsibility for funding the type of education. This is the Campaign for Fiscal Equity language, the kind of basic foundational education that students are entitled to. East, School Without Walls, SOTA, we are entitled to those and we shouldn't draw back. Now that we finally have been successful in getting people in Albany to do what the Court of Appeals said they should do, we should not step back from that commitment. And East, along with a number of other schools, is part of making that Court of Appeals decision, the foundation aid, a reality.
Okay, Commissioner Powell.
With permission, I never do this. I have to walk my daughter out and give her flowers for her senior night tonight.
No, go, Sean. It's okay. We'll continue. And if there are any additional questions, Sean, the board has until Thursday to submit final round 3 questions. So if anything comes up, you'll see it and you'll be alerted by board staff.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
So I'm hoping that John will revisit this conversation by reviewing the tape, because I'm not sure how this translates into a question log or whatever. But Dr. Nelms spoke about how the curriculum that was developed isn't being adopted by other schools. And he also said that The teachers are more committed to the curriculum because they wrote it themselves. So then the question becomes, and that was the big financial investment, right, in this receivership school. So what I'd like to see is a blueprint that shows us how to migrate the curriculum work to other high schools, particularly those aspects of the East High model that that address the remediation needs that students had. I know that starts to talk about looking at kids from a deficit model, but in order to increase graduation rate as they have to have done some significant remediation on those reading and math scores in the 6th through 8 grade levels. So what's the blueprint to transferring that knowledge to other schools, particularly other schools that are currently either in receivership or on the cusp of receivership as themselves? I mean, the issue here is once East High comes out of its receivership status and becomes a school in good standing, that's when the relationship between the U of R and the district come to an end. When the state has declared that East is in good standing. That hasn't happened yet. So we've got, if this is a model that we don't want the funding to just, all the money we've invested in it to go down the drain, we have to develop a blueprint for how to transfer that knowledge that has been developed over these years, the insights that have been developed, the curriculum that has been developed, and get it out into the other schools that need it most. That's how you take this model and make it not so expensive to carry that model through to other schools. What makes it expensive is having to start from scratch all over again, and we don't need to do that. So that's the conversation I want to have with Dr. Nelms and key people from our administration and the EPO administration to see how we can really make that transformation.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I just want to add, though, that the graduation rates for the schools I mentioned was not because of COVID or last year or the fact that there were no regions. I do want to uplift the work that those schools and our staff in those schools have intentionally done to raise graduation. And those schools have all come to, before the school board, have come to different leadership meetings to present the models that they're using to do that work intentionally. And so I just want to uplift that, because schools are listening tonight, which I believe that they are, because we're talking about schools, all schools tonight in budget deliberations, that I want to uplift that work is being done. And then again, just as a reminder, and this is a request for Vice President Elliott around these ELA pieces, because we can talk about graduation rates have increased on one side of it, but then if we look at the ELA and math for East compared to other schools, they're just about the same, with not only a small percentage of increase from 8 to 10. So I just want to put that out there. And then Kalia, I'm going to request, if you're on, if you can make a request to Sean Nelms when he's presenting his data on Thursday, that he presents the raw numbers and the percentages of the amount of students when he's starting to the amount of students that he's going to be presenting at the end. Because when there's a significant change in the admissions number or the enrollment numbers, that has an impact on what that percentages will really look like if we're just talking about percentages without the raw data. So Vice President Elliott, if you don't mind, I will reach out to you and you and I can meet one-on-one to have some further discussions around this particular piece. President White, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It's a new hand, or as our superintendent said a refreshed hand.
Okay.
A couple of things. I wanted to, as you guys say, uplift what Commissioner Powell just said and tell those folks who weren't aware of it, that I have spoken repeatedly to Superintendent Nelms and to Superintendent Myers in a public and private setting, and to Superintendent Meyer's predecessors about replicating the curriculum. It's not about replicating schools. As Commissioner Powell says, we've spent millions of dollars on developing a curriculum that apparently is having some success. And again, doesn't mean other schools aren't having some success, but what has clearly been a failure in the past is the district to implement a comprehensive, consistent curriculum that impacts in a positive way major points of progress like ELA and math scores. The district has failed to do that in the past. And what I have repeatedly said, and Commissioner Powell has said it again tonight, is that we made an investment. And I know you all have heard me say this. We made an investment, not just in the building, but in what was taking place within that building. And one of the major components was the establishment of a curriculum. We should be replicating that where possible. Certainly, we should be taking use of it as we try to create a district-wide curriculum that has evaded us for years. The other thing I wanted to say is my comment about the Regents exams. No one said that schools aren't working their butts off. Teachers, administrators, cafeteria people, centuries are not working their butt off to increase their graduation rates and their ELA and math scores. What I said was, when making comparisons about those schools, the comparison has to be over the long haul. What East has done, and I also indicated what SOTA has done, what School Without Walls has done, is they have generated the kind of improvement or results over an extended period of time. We cannot just look at these comparisons and say, okay, we're going to compare a school that the last year or two has had increases as compared to a school that has had increases over 4 or 5 years. So when you talk about investing or replicating schools and practices, the best measure of whether you should do that or not is to measure their results over an extended period of time. Let me repeat, because I think Commissioner LeBron is right. Schools are listening. Nobody said that the results that you had last year, this year, or the year before that were invalid. I certainly didn't say that. What I said is, when you compare the production, the results, in terms of thinking whether you want to replicate or not, that analysis has to be over an extended period of time, because that's the only way you know whether the practices are working or not. And then finally, I have been saying that my focus, many of our colleagues' focus, has been on the graduation rates. You've heard me say that for many months. And we often left it to the administration to take care of ELA and math scores. So clearly instructionally driven focus. And I will say, I think that was a mistake. I think we should have been equally focused on telling them, my mantra, what gets measured gets done. That's what we said 7, 8 years ago, maybe even longer, about graduation rates. I'll be the first to admit, we shouldn't have deferred to superintendents in terms of focusing on ELA and math scores. I have said for the last 4 or 5 years, 3 years, we ought to begin to focus on that. And I'm glad to hear Commissioner LeBron and others, certainly within the administration, are beginning to focus on it. Because I will say, as I look back on my career, if I was as focused on ELA and math scores as we were on graduation rates, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. We deferred because of I can just speak for myself, because of the instructional nature of it, ELA, English Language Arts, and mathematics, we deferred to the people who are educators. And I regret that. I will tell you I regret that, because I'm confident if we were equally as focused with racehorse with blinders on, I think our ELA and math scores would have been much higher. And I agree with anybody, including you, Commissioner LeBron, says we have to begin to focus on that, because I've been saying that for the last 3 or 4 years, and I regret not saying it sooner, because I think we'd be in a different place.
So I just want to say for the record, I came in also talking about ELA math scores and also our bilingual and multi-language learners graduation
Absolutely.
rate and the dismal results there. So I just want to uplift that. I hear you that now it's going to be a focus, and I'm equally as grateful to Vice President Elliott, who also said we need to bring the ESA committee back and have a focus on that there. So I just want to put that out there. But if we are done with East, I am going to turn it over back to Dr. Meyer Smalls, and you can call your chiefs up however you want in terms of the order for presentation. And are the chiefs presenting their schools? Is that what they're doing? Like each chief is presenting all of their schools that they're responsible for?
Yes, yes.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Meyer Small, and you can do your intro for them. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Good evening, and good evening to President White, Vice President Elliott, and our other commissioners. Tonight, you are going to hear budget presentations from our Chief of Schools relative to the 2021-2022 budget. We have Dr. Shirley Green, Dr. Carmine Peluso, Mrs. Sheila Webster, and also we have our, if you'll just give me one moment, we also have a familiar face to some, Mrs. Laurel Avery D. Toy, who will be serving as an interim chief starting next week. And we want to thank her as well because she's been an integral person over the past few weeks to this process. So with that, I will turn it over to the team to provide an update relative to the budget of our schools.
Good evening, President White, Vice President Elliott, Board Commissioners. I'm Carmine Peluso. I'm here with the school chiefs to kind of go through our budget for the 21-22 school year and give you an executive summary of our department. So on the next slide, you'll see how we're organized. And we're a department of 6. We have Dr. Shirley Green, who has Network 1. Myself, Dr. Carmine Peluso, that has Network 2. We have Mrs. Sheila Webster and Laurel Avery DeToy right now with Network 3. We have 2 executive assistants, Ms. Wanda Pedraza Santos and Mrs. Nydia Saltares. And then we have a lead secretary that is partially shared with us and then also works with all the school secretaries. So just how we are organized. We have 31 elementary schools from K6, K8s, and K12s. We have the 13 secondary schools of 7-8, 7-12, and 9-12. And then we have 7 program schools shared between the 3 of us. So we split them up in equal portions of elementary, secondary, and program. So what is our role? Our role is to provide direct supervision to the school principals. We facilitate, coach, and support school leadership development. We oversee and support school improvement plans. We serve as a critical link between school principals and the central office department teams. And we function as a thought partner, a problem solver, a change agent to internal and external stakeholders with an unwavering commitment to get the job done. So we align our work to both the strategic plan, the academic plan, and the fiscal plan. So around the area of providing high quality learning experiences, we work with Tier 1 instruction, common curriculum, and best instructional practices. We also work with our schools on multi-tiered systems of support with directly aligned to the academic plan. And then with the fiscal plan, we align that to staffing allocations, as well as some of the grant funding allocations that our buildings receive. For building strong communities, we work with our community-based partners, community agencies. In most cases, we use grant fund allocations to help support our buildings with those community-based partners. Aligning with ensuring an inclusive, caring, and safe learning environment, We work with our schools to ensure they're using restorative practices to promote inclusiveness, relationship building, and problem solving. And then for fostering dynamic leadership, we work with the Chief Academic Officer, TNL, and the Office of Human Capital to create a talent management plan to properly support and develop all staff with a focus on succession planning, particularly for key leadership roles. So just a little bit about the school budget process and how school budgets are developed and how staffing is determined. School staffing is developed using projected enrollment, course requests at the secondary schools, and then what our contractual requirements are. You know, school chiefs work with our grants department to determine how to utilize title funding, if they're going to use it for intervention, are they going to use it for community-based organization support, are they going to use it for instructional coaching that is aligned to their school comprehensive education plans and their improvement plans. And then once that's done, we meet with the principals to review the whole projection for their building. Lastly, the Office of School Chiefs, they have a budget, and the budget is an area where we hold funds for items like transportation for field trips. So you'll see a field trip line, and then that money is allocated to buildings based on their use. There's an instructional supply line where buildings get an operational budget, and those operational budgets are used for school supplies, custodial supplies, for their lunch aids at the elementary school. They're used for their printing and their posting, for their postage. So we hold back a portion of that. That funding is based on enrollment. And then towards the halfway through the year, once enrollment is settled, we make sure that that money's allocated correctly to the buildings. We hold substitute money in our line. And this money is held in the chief budget and then allocated to school. And that substitute money could be used for vacancies that are not filled, long-term sub-assignments, if it's for medical or maternity leaves, and also for those per diem subs that come from day to day. And then in our budget is other items, such as where we hold money for our diplomas. We have some contracts with partners such like MCC, and then any district-wide printing and mailing, like we had to do last year when we mailed report cards centrally, and we mailed some items centrally during the COVID closure, and we mailed those here and we paid for those out of that budget. So once again, our school staffing budget is mostly done on projections, enrollment and course requirements. The Office of School Chief budget is how we handle money and hold back from the schools and then reallocate them to the building. So we were asked to kind of give a quick executive summary of our department. And at this point, we would open it up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Carmine. I am looking at the screen to see if anybody has any questions on the presentations or any questions related to the section for schools, which I believe is, hold on, is section 4, school profiles and budgets. So I do have some questions, but I'm going to wait to my colleagues if they have any questions on the presentation or any questions related to schools in section 4. Commissioner Powell, I see your hand up first.
Thank you. So I imagine that FTEs can be assigned pretty much on a formula basis, and except where a building is like on the cusp, like it's, you know, too small for 2 APs, too small for an AP, and too big to do without kind of scenario. Sorry about the dog. It's just but what about the K-8s? Don't they require a little more staffing in in APs precisely because they often have itinerant staff and that can't be around for transition times because they have to transition themselves to other buildings. What does a formula look like for the K-8s, especially where itinerant teachers are involved?
So I'll start the answer here. We used formulas for K-8 and then 7-12. And then if there was a combination of buildings, we looked at the best case of those formulas to see what we should staff a building at. We did have some reductions of APs in, I believe, 2 of our K-8 schools. And that has been due to a trend of losing sections over the last couple of years. So they've had a trend of lower enrollment. And it was when they get to that breaking point of under, in some cases, under 300, so that's why they were assigned to 1 AP.
So what you're saying is it really is formula driven and a school could lose a resource just by tipping the wrong side of the enrollment formula.
And I would say yes, but it would be over a couple of years of tipping that side. It wouldn't be our first reaction to remove that AP. I think in certain cases, based on our formula, it's 2 years to even maybe sometimes even longer of having being lower than what we have as determined ratios.
So this ties into a longstanding concern about how prepared are schools to work to keep their students in the building as opposed to having them transfer to charter schools or to another school within our district. If a school has been if a school's enrollment has been trending down, then it strikes me that they're not doing the work of trying to hold on to their families. What support are schools getting so that they aren't declining enrollment and so that they don't lose these resources?
So Commissioner Powell, the declining enrollment is happening across the district, not just at the K-8s. And so as we look at that, it is not that they are not holding their students. When you look at the lower levels, they're not even getting the students at that level, which as they go up to the 8th grade, it's a consistent pattern that the numbers are declining. When we first started the K-8s, we did look at assigning an assistant principal as we created that transition. But over time, as we have been right sizing based on enrollment, we have not continuously kept the additional assistant principal.
I appreciate your focus on the AP position in your answer. I think I'm trying to broaden the question to say, we are in direct competition with charter schools. What support are we offering all of our schools to try to help them to retain families? I mean, we're not just losing them because they're not coming in at kindergarten. We're losing them throughout the life cycle. We're getting them at kindergarten and losing them at 2nd grade or losing them at 4th grade. So what supports are we giving to the schools, if any? And maybe my question is really showing a weakness in our system. What supports are we giving to schools to help them hang on to the kids that start there?
Powell, I think I can respond from a holistic sense in regard to how do you maintain kids in the building, right? It really begins with those relationships that teachers build with their families, and those relationships that teachers build also depends on the leadership and their ability to build those relationships with their staff, right? And offering a program that builds the whole child, and I think about programs that offer IB opportunities, expeditionary learning opportunities, and enrichment and diverse arts. Those programs hold our children and they hold our families. And K-8s work in that sense because our families have the opportunity to stay with us right through until the end of 8th grade. So I don't believe that there's just one answer we can offer, but I think it begins with the foundation that we build at kindergarten. So some of those systems of being able to really actively engage our families at K-1-2 can really sustain us all the way through 8. So that begins to respond to your question. I'll certainly open up to my colleagues here.
I think I'd like to add a component, Commissioner Powell. One of the things that I can speak to that really was a solid piece for improving attendance, enthusiasm, excitement was building our arts program at school number 8. We were able to keep our students. The reality is we actually compete with each other, right? Because 7th and 8th grade, when students have the school of choice, it's very enticing to think that maybe the grass is greener on the other side, right? But that I agree with Sheila in the sense that truly the power of even beginning those relationships in preschool, and that was one of the components that parents asked very intensely for when we worked at number 8 school. We opened a second section, we opened a third section. So I agree with building those foundations. And I'm also going to say we listened to student voice on that. And we wanted to know, because when we started at 8, our attendance was abysmal. And we got to over the district expectations for that and met those metrics because the students wanted expanded learning. They wanted arts. We put in theater. We put in music. We listened to what they wanted. And boy, did they come every single day. And we were able to hang on to them. Not all, but quite a few.
Rebecca?
Thank you. I just had a question from within the budget book. As far as the lines related to facilities and related, it's a pretty substantial increase, proportionate to what it was in the previous year. Have you taken on additional space? Oh, it's sorry, it's section 4, page 68. My apologies.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. And it's the facilities, in the 250-page book. And and on the facilities and related line, it went from 142 up to 910. So I was just curious as to what had shifted in that. And I do have another question after this, if that's okay.
142 to 910.
If we could.
If that needs to go to the question log, it's totally.
Yep, and also Carlene, could you just.
Sure.
142 to 767, do you, I just want to see if we can add that to the question log because I have to look in terms of what those numbers are unless Carlene has a sense of what it is now.
Right, I would want to take a look at that and go into further detail. So certainly add it to the question log and get right back to you. Thank you.
Mike,
Okay, well then.
Either?
Huh?
I was just asking if Mike had a sense either, if he could chime in.
No, I was actually going to jump in and say the same thing they did. We can, I take a look at it tomorrow as well and make sure that we have the right reference for you.
Okay, so I'm going to have Rebecca then ask her other question and see if we can get an answer for that one. So go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. And the other question was on the substitute line, which is page 4, section 4, page 69. Is it new that the substitutes are in this section? Because in 2019-2020, the substitutes were about $126,000. And then in 2021, they started clearly, to have the substitutes in this section. is there a reason that they were put in this section? Were they in a different section before?
Yes.
So,
I'm sorry. Do you want me to take
go
that?
ahead, Carlene, go ahead.
That actually was a decision that we made in our effort to better align the expenditures within the budget. What you may remember is that some of the criticism that we've had in the past is that there were a number of central office codes, and they were, again, within my budget department, that then the money was taken out of those codes and then placed within the schools. And so to better align the expenditure with the need, it was moved over to the chiefs. I am not by any means saying that this is the end result of where that money will reside. This is one step in correcting and just to make the resource available to the alignment of need. But there's more work to be done here on all areas. And I know in working with Chris, with HCI, with the chiefs, we all recognize that there has to be a better way of doing this. But for right now, it is with the chiefs, since they oversee the schools, they oversee the expenditure, they know the best use of that money. And so right now, for the time being, as we start this year, that's where we're proposing it to reside.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Elliott.
Thank you, Commissioner. So how does the budget support improving student performance at receivership schools?
So I could begin, and then I will, receivership schools have received an allocation either from some title money, and through that title money, which is a little bit larger than other schools in good standing or TSI would receive, we ensure that the extra support they purchase, I guess, for lack of a better word, with that money is aligned to their school comprehensive education plan, and they're in receivership status, they're demonstrable indicators. So if there's some supports around social emotional learning, it may be some additional social workers. If it's some supports around instruction, it could be the add of more intervention prevention teachers or data coaches, and that's how those funds are allocated, and that's how when we meet with them, we kind of align their spending to those demonstrable indicators.
But nothing directly related to academics?
Yes, in most cases, yes, in most cases, yes, because the demonstrable indicators are tied to those and academics, but other demonstrable indicators may be inclusive of community schools models, or maybe inclusive of social emotional supports for students around behavior. So they may want to add another social worker with some of those monies as well. So it's really tied to their demonstrable indicators and what they need to meet in order to get out of receivership.
So how has that worked for us? When we are providing those resources for ancillary services as opposed to directly providing it for on academic services.
So when we talk about the academic services, when we talk about the intervention prevention teachers or the teachers on assignment, those supports are directly supporting our students in the buildings. So when you look at those receivership schools, you will see those staff members supporting students in small group instruction, an AIS block, or various blocks which will support students on marking period recovery. So it is some academic supports using those Title I funds.
Okay, so how has it worked for us? Have we seen improvement in academic performance using the methods that you are articulating right now? Have we seen improvements using those tactics, those methods?
So when we look at, specifically, I'll talk about Monroe. When we look at Monroe and they had those services, you have seen the growth in their academic performance. Leadership Academy for young men, with those supports, you've seen the growth in their academic performance as well. And so slowly you see that growth of our receivership schools. When you look at School 28, who has a number of intervention prevention teachers, we have been able to see that growth in student performance as they were identified as receivership schools.
So has because I haven't looked at the numbers lately, has the growth been significant using this model, using this method?
So we don't have the growth for our cohort 2 receivership models because of the closure last year, because that would have been their first year of having growth. But if we look at their NWA performance, you can see some of the growth. But we don't have the state measure growth that their demonstrable indicators are on. But when you look at our cohort 1 schools that have gotten out of receivership, you definitely can see the growth that when they had intervention prevention teachers, those cohort 1 receivership schools were able to come out of receivership.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Jallo?
I want to go back to the original question from Commissioner Elliott. Is there any money in this budget to support receivership schools above and beyond the money that's assigned directly to the receivership school? The monies you're talking about are monies directly given to those schools. Is there any money designated in the 21-22 RCSD budget dedicated to improving outcomes for students in receivership schools?
Beyond Superintendent?
Well, I was going to say, I think in part, we would need Dr. Black to come on and to share some of the things that she's been working with Dan Hurley around this, because her office under the leadership of Dr. Morris have more of that area, I would say, more than the chiefs would, unless it goes beyond staffing. So I would
necessarily asking the chiefs. I'm asking,
right.
Really, it's not really a Dr. Black question per se. It's just, is there money in the budget for this or not? I'm sure that whatever's there, we could talk about what it's going to do and how it's going to push the agenda. But if it's there, it's there. If it's going to be used, if it's going to be funded by other monies, that's fine too. It's just really a question as to whether there's been an allocation of funding dedicated to improving the number of receivership schools. And if not, maybe it's coming from somewhere else. But the monies that were spoken to before are monies that over the years have always come directly to the school.
So, good evening. Beyond staffing in the current budget, we haven't allocated additional funds. However, in our CARES Act conversations and our conversations about our increased funding, we are deploying significant planning and resources around thinking about what can be different within our receivership schools, including additional staffing and/or program shifts to account for additional intervention, additional offerings, and exploring options around extended time or different schedules.
Thanks, Dr. Black.
Okay, so I have a few questions, especially related to schools, but before I go specifically into 3 different schools that I want to talk about or ask questions around, I do want to ask how much money is specifically dedicated to academic improvements across all of our schools. And so that was kind of not clear to me in the individual budgets for schools. So just wanting to understand that. I'll do it question by question though.
Do you mind just giving that again? Out of all the schools, are you saying in terms of academics? I'm sorry.
Yeah, how much money is being budgeted specifically to academic improvement?
So again, when we look at the academic improvement, we use Title I dollars to add the additional intervention, prevention, reading teachers, teachers on assignments. And so if we wanted to know the exact dollar amount, I would ask that we put that on the question log so that we can work with our grants department to pull the exact dollars out.
Okay, we can put that in there. And since you mentioned reading teachers, I wasn't even aware that we were going to be bringing back reading teachers or increasing reading teachers from the cuts we made before on them. So I would be interested in understanding if we're doing that as well. So a twofold question, Kalia. The other piece I do want to uplift is around bilingual and multiple language learner students and what plans are for our schools around that population, because that, as you may remember, so I feel like I have to give some back history on like the traumatic experience that I experienced last year fighting for bilingual and multiple language learner education and the programs that we have in the district, and whether we're going to appropriately fund those this year for our schools that have them.
So Commissioner LeBron, are you specifically asking about the bilingual programs within our schools?
Yes.
So where we have bilingual programs in our schools, we have allocated services. When I think about some of our K-8s, we had not previously had the supports for the bilingual once the students got into 7-8, and we've allocated additional staff to support the 7-8 program in those K-8s. When we look at Monroe and Edison, which has bilingual programs for our high school students, we have allocated bilingual positions to support those students and their needs within those high school programs at Wilson, Edison, and Monroe. So they do have the additional allocations for those bilingual programs as we have been adding now.
And then in our K-6 or K-8 schools, are we allocating staff there? And then also this portion of my question can go into the question log. I would like to understand and see what page and section for those schools I can find that information. I was not able to find it through those school profiles. So if you can answer where it's specifically I can see that, then that would be great, because we still have lots of issues related to multi-language learner and bilingual education. And my hope is that we use some of the CARE Act dollars to appropriately fund and uplift those programs within the district, but also I don't want it to be restored to what we had before. It wasn't enough. So we clearly need to uplift and support that area a little bit further. The other piece is I want to understand who's making decisions around schools and their budgets. And then I have 3 questions related to 3 specific schools. So who are the decision makers in this year's budget?
I just want to go back to the presentation where, in terms of the budget for schools, the staffing was based off of course requests, projected enrollment that was provided to the school chiefs, and then sections based on those projected enrollment.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually one of my questions in the board question log, because I mean, I guess I don't know if it needs to go into the board question log, but I'll ask who are the decision makers. And I say that because last year was clear that it wasn't our superintendent as he was transitioning out. And so there was a little bit of chaos. I personally would like to understand who is making decisions for our schools in the budget. But that brings me to school 12, because I did ask about ratios, and I was given a response from administration, and I will put this on record now. Some of the responses, and this is to you, Dr. Meyer Smalls, I know that you yourself did not do the responses, but some of the responses from your staff were too generic and general. And I don't know how the rest of my commissioners feel about it, but when I get those types of responses, I then feel obligated to keep asking more and more questions till I get to what I'm trying to actually get answered to. One of those questions was related to, do we have a ratio and a formula for vice principals in the district? And one of the questions was, yes, this is the formula, but the formula didn't make sense. And I say that because and I'll bring it up at school 12, there is a proposed cut to an AP at school 12. And so I had some concerns around that, primarily because, again, historically, before we had our student that passed away in that school, we had that school's administrators, we had teachers and parents collectively beg the board to provide them with support and structure. And then we lost a student. And then we brought in a new principal because we had some sub admin who was not qualified to be a sub administrator in that school building. And then COVID happened. And I just feel like, can we please like allow that school to get a break and get the supports that they need? And John is also still new to that school, the principal there. And certainly he hasn't even been able to have an entire year without some crisis of some sort. So the ratio that I was given based on the response doesn't match if I look at other schools that have even a smaller percentage of students. So I need that to be revisited. I want to uplift the fact that School 19 has some proposed cuts, and that School 19 also is another school that has seen some improvements, and certainly that growth is starting now because of the leadership there, but there is a model there that supports the staffing. And my concern is that if we make those cuts there, knowing that there's some future things coming down the pipeline, I'm concerned about that. But the last school that I want to uplift, and then you can take it however you want to answer it, Dr. Myers, and allocate it to whoever, is the conversation around RIA. And so last year, myself and Commissioner Vice President Elliott did request a meeting with the state and the superintendent that was here at the time to advocate against any cuts to RIA. At that time, it's my understanding now that our former superintendent and his team were adamantly against RIA for whatever reason. And we were kind of like put into a difficult position. And some of the things that they cited were the fact that RIA sometimes held on to kids. But I also want to acknowledge that a program like RIA was started because we are a city that welcomes refugees and immigrants and new Americans with open arms. We, as a community, have also created opportunities for them to seek unique medical care, like the Refugee Center, like the partnership with Monroe County and Catholic Family Center. And so for me, it makes sense that we have a unique program like RIA to welcome those families in and provide them with that grounding that they need for education, to then transfer them to the school district. And right before today's board meeting, we did get a request to support RIA and not support the cuts on behalf of the board. And I want to honor that and also remind the community that we are a refugee welcoming community and that we are anticipating another 1,000 students in the course of the year. And our schools will not be equipped, Dr. Myers-Smalls. They just will not be equipped to provide the supports that are going to be necessary for our students. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I see some additional hands. And I don't know if you want to answer anything that I've mentioned, but.
Commissioner LeBron, I'll start. I want to respond to school number 12 first, as far as the AP allocation. We certainly can go back and take a look at that. We actually had a good meeting with some of our principal representatives last night, and that was one of the things that came up as far as us looking at going beyond looking at ratios. I think one thing that's important to note is that initially when we developed the budget, we were under a different kind of set of constraints. And so we have some unique opportunities to take a deeper look. So we certainly are, open to looking at that, as well as school number 19. So let me respond that way to that. And then as far as RIA is concerned, I am open to meeting with Mary. That email was the first time I'd heard from Mary. And so I emailed her back and asked if we could have a conversation and meet. So hopefully that will happen very, very soon, where we can talk through. I also have been working with with the State Education Department, Associate Commissioner Alvarez, because she has that concern as well. So what I just want to be clear is I don't like what's necessarily being portrayed that we are not working on that and that we are not concerned about that. I am not anti-RIA, and I would say that no one on the cabinet is, but we need to open those lines of communication, and it can't just be an email 90 minutes prior to a board meeting about a concern when we could have had some conversations. And so with all due respect, I will go back and I will meet with Mary, with Carmine, and with Melody and Janelle and Kathy to have those conversations, because we do not want to be caught off guard and not be ill prepared to receive the students, and especially given what you said, that we are a sanctuary city and that we open our arms to students who are coming from all over the world. So that is something we will continue to look at.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Smalls. And I do want to say for the record, I'm not talking about you or your administration. This actually all happened before the majority of you and your team members were here. This really started with the previous administration. And certainly I know for myself and Commissioner Elliott would love to be a part of those conversations. I can't speak for Vice President Elliott, but I know we were a part of the original conversations, and I can send you all of the documentations and the amount of data that was collected in the fight to support to keep RIA. So I am very appreciative of your response to that. And I hear you, and I did not realize that you were not informed of the history from even other individuals and even some of the chiefs that were here during that time frame. So I will make sure you get some of that back and forth dialogue and those data points so that we can move forward. And then Vice President Elliott, I see your hand is up, Commissioner Powell, and then President White.
I think Commissioner Powell's hand was up before mine, Commissioner LeBron.
Okay, Commissioner Powell.
Okay, well, thank you for yielding, Commissioner Elliott. I assumed I would go to the bottom of the stack because I already asked one question, but I want to kind of piggyback on a question that sort of whizzed by about who's responsible for making the budget decisions about schools. May I assume that the chiefs responsible for any given network are going to be held responsible for the funding decisions for the schools that they hold within their network? And along the same lines, the PowerPoint that was presented, could it be added to board docs? I might also suggest that the screen that shows which schools go, or which schools are in what network, because that's different from the zones, be added to the budget book. I'm going to recommend in section 1, immediately after the org chart. The section 4 is arranged by zone, which is helpful if you're a parent and you're looking at schools in a particular zone, but it's not very helpful for those of us who are trying to trace back what chief to talk to about any given school. Or not that I talk directly to the chiefs without circulating a question in the question log, but I would recommend that the network layout that was described in the PowerPoint be affixed to the budget right behind the org chart. So the question is it fair to say that the chief that within the network is responsible for the financial decisions of all of the schools within that network?
So it's a process. The chiefs meet with the respective school or program administrator. Then they worked with certainly the deputies, myself, finance, school efficiency. So, but the final decision rests certainly with me, Commissioner Powell, but it does go through several hoops, if you will, or several lenses to get to the point, the final decision.
Right. I would expect that to be your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Elliott then, and President White.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask a tough question here. I hear you saying, Dr. Meyer Small, that you're going to look into these things as Commissioner Chairperson, Commissioner LeBron mentioned about RIA. You know, they had a community over there and really working to mainstream our students. They've done a good job over there. My concern is, and then, you know, I asked about an additional principal over at School 3. I guess I need to understand, I guess I need to know that what we're asking as a board that is being seriously considered, or is this something that, are you prepared that if the board makes a different decision, that the district can live with the decision that the board makes?
Well,
so if I were to make a proposal to that we do an increase in for additional principals, say at School 3, for example, and I get the 4 votes, are you all willing? Can you all deal with that? Because I want to make sure that we really are getting the resources that are needed into the schools. There's already this disconnect between central office and the schools. And from a board perspective, it's just important that when we're out into these schools and we're hearing this, that we're really ensuring that what those schools needed, they're getting. We've been here a long time and we've trusted superintendents in the past and the administration, and I want to continue to do that. But at the same time, I want to make sure that the budget is supporting the schools. And if the decision is from central office, something different than what the schools are requesting, then the board may have to make a different decision. Well, and I guess I just don't want that to happen.
Sure.
Because I want to make sure that we're getting the resources that are needed into the schools so that we can help to support them. I no longer want to have the kind of tension that we've had over the years between central office and the schools. How can we really support these schools? And so I just don't want to have to come back and make a proposal, you know, offer an amendment to this budget. I want to be able to, that we're all on the same page, that we're making sure that we're getting these resources to the schools. And we're getting to the schools in a way in which they're making the requests from for those schools. So that's where I am on that. And I don't want to have to make, you know, an executive decision or propose an executive decision, but I just want to make sure that what they're asking for, and we got an opportunity, we got some, you know, we've got some additional funding. We've got an opportunity to make some things happen. I just want to see those things happen. I want us to say yes to the schools more than we say no, given our, and to align with the strategic plan. I'm not saying not align with the strategic plan, but I want to make sure that the decision, because they're not going to look at you, Dr. Meyer, they're going to look at this board. So how do we make sure that what the schools are asking, I know from my schools, that I can say yes to those schools and that we can amend the budget right now to ensure that the schools are getting the resources that they need. Because if you bring me something that is not in line, if I can get the 4 votes and it doesn't represent what the schools are needing, I'm going to recommend to my colleagues that we do something different. So I just want to share that, and because I want to make sure that the schools are getting what they need.
Appreciate
that's what I have right now.
Appreciate that, Vice President Elliott. And certainly I hope it doesn't have to come to that. And that's where we need to certainly use a combination of what the needs are, but also with what our results are, what the data says, et cetera. So again, I am more than willing and happy to have the conversation with any principal, with the chiefs around specific needs. But we have done what I feel to be very careful vetting and looking at because it's an art and a science here. We need to look at the numbers and be mindful of that, but we also have to be understanding of programmatic needs. But as you know, Vice President Elliott and the rest of the commissioners and those, watching, that it is a balance, and certainly making sure that we also have contingency plans that we can quickly put in place should we have the increased numbers. Part of our problem in some instances is that we have overstaffed. We think that we're going to get to a certain point and we haven't. We also know that with the example of RIA, we were very clearly told by the State Education Department that we cannot add K-6. And I know that that's a desire of Mary and her school community. If there is something that has changed that's not in violation with what the state has told us, we can look at that. But to get that request, frankly, 2.5 months before the school year ends is a little concerning to me. And I just have to say that with all due respect. But again, I am happy to sit with the chiefs and principals to talk through if there's some additional information that certainly they can provide. We'll take a look at that. We have a little bit of time to be able to do that. I don't want it to be that the superintendent and the board are not getting that it's forced to vote. In some instances, it may have to get to that, and I will be respectful of that. I might not agree, and we certainly have to agree to disagree in some instances, but that's not going to hinder our ability to work together as a unit. So
Absolutely.
that doesn't stop me. But Carmine, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add, or any of the chiefs.
So I just want to say we didn't do any reductions for school 3. Vice President Elliott, I think you mentioned school 3, so I want to say that's an add versus, is that what you were mentioning?
Yeah, but I see that it's the same. I see 3 APs for this year, and it's projected 3, and I think that there was a need for a 4th. So that's what, and because the student population has increased over there, according to the principal, that another AP is needed. Now, if I got that information wrong, then I stand corrected. But again, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that all of our schools, as best as we can, given our constrained resources, that we're saying yes more than we're saying no to our schools, so that they can do this work. You all are not in the classrooms. I'm not in the classrooms. I'm not in those buildings every day. But so for me, it's about trusting what's being said in the schools. And again, I'll say this, that we say yes more than we say no. And if we have to say no, then we are intelligent about what that response is. And so that's what I'm saying. How can we make sure that the schools get what they need in order to ensure that we can have the kind of academic success that I envision that we have in this district? So that's where I am, and I'll be taking another look at the budget and go on from there. So that's it for right now. So I thank you, Madam Superintendent, for your response to that. We certainly, there may be times where we have to agree to disagree, and I don't think that that's going to affect us at all. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. President White?
Yes, a couple things. I just, for folks who may not know, Mary has been advocating, obviously, for RIA, and more specifically for a K-6 configuration at RIA for quite some time. I realize that the request may have come in recently, but I can tell you, and I know all my colleagues will say this, she has, when we were having the controversy over RIA last year, when Terry was here, that proposal was one of the ideas that came up. So I did want the record to be clear that she has been trying to figure out a way to make RIA work for our population in this community that has embraced folks from other countries. I should, however, make clear that although Terry and I had our disagreements over RIA, and some of you colleagues who were around at that time will know the specific meeting that I'm referring to. And there was some concern about some of the things he said that I think created a misunderstanding about what people knew and when they knew it. But that's another discussion for another time. What I do think is important to recognize, and I know Mary and every board member knows this, is that it wasn't Terry who, even though he apparently had some plan to not allow RIA to continue, or that was his view of RIA, that view ultimately what was dispositive, what was a deal breaker was not Terry, it was the state. The state made it very clear. You guys remember seeing those emails? I spoke to the chancellor, who is now the commissioner. They had described in excruciating detail why they thought RIA was not, and our superintendent, if you didn't know this, Leslie, and perhaps you did, because I think you were working for the state at the time. I just got to be clear. While I think Terry misrepresented what people knew and when they knew it, that the directive to close RIA down came clearly from the state. I was engaged in direct conversations about trying to figure out a way in which we could have RIA continue. And the state, and they wrote memos about it, was very clear in those direct one-on-one conversations and in those memos that not because any board member thought it so, or that even Terry thought it so, that RIA was illegally constituted. It wasn't entitled to exist in the way it was existing. That wasn't any board member saying that. Certainly wasn't any board member saying that. Terry might have just been going along with the message, but what shut RIA down in its current configuration that everybody really appreciates was the state. It wasn't Terry, it was the state. They were unequivocally clear. They were not going to allow RIA to continue to exist. And at that point, I remember Mary saying, hey, listen, what about a K-6 configuration? So I just wanted the record to be clear, is even though I may have disagreed with Terry on a particular RIA issue and how he presented facts or did not present facts, the closure of RIA, that which many of us, I don't think there's a board member or community member or someone in this state, because RIA has been visited across the country as an example of how you can deal with people who are new to this country, how you can successfully educate them. It wasn't anybody here in Rochester that wanted to bring it down. It was Albany that cited regulation that said it couldn't do this. So I say that, Superintendent Meyer, so that in considering that renewed conversation, if you weren't aware, and you may have been, if you weren't aware of why it closed down, it wasn't because of Terry. Certainly wasn't because of me or any board member who've all been supportive of what has taken place. Matter of fact, Commissioner Elliott and I were around, and Mary will tell you, we were one of the ones that principally helped get it started. Mm-hmm. It was the state, it was Albany. So when you have these conversations with Mary, those conversations begin with those memos that really brought down RIA as we all understand it and as we all appreciated it.
Sure. And I just want to make sure it's clear that as far as RIA is concerned, although we have staffed for 150, although there are only 70 students projected right now. So there is room for 80 more students, 712 at this point for RIA. And then to build contingency plans should we have more students come.
Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, I just want to, final comment because someone reached out to me just now. Again, I want to reiterate that that central office is saying yes more than it's saying no, and that it is a relationship between central office and the schools that is collaborative, because it seems on a number of levels that it is not collaborative. It's sort of a dogmatic kind of leadership to the schools. And so we've got to change that. We've got to change here again. It's got to be a win-win situation, because it just is important that if we're providing support to those schools, to our schools, I just think the way in which, And I'm not talking about this administration in particular. I'm talking about since I've been here, that there's been this discord and disconnect between central office and between the schools. We've got to change that. You know, I'd like to begin to hear from the buildings that they're feeling supportive of central office. And that's all I'll say for right now. Thank you.
Sure. And, you know, I think, Vice President Elliott, where I think it gets difficult that is if we say no, that is equated to a lack of support. And so we've got to work on fixing that as well, that we have the communication and we make sure in the communication we explain why. But similar to what you said to me, that the board may have to override a decision. In some instances, the superintendent and her team may have to override a decision. That doesn't change the support of the school. So I think it's about opening up the lines of communication and making sure we're clear about what we're looking at and what the needs are. So,
and I think that if the schools understand that, because even in the community, there are times when I have to, you know, go against what some of the people in the community want. But once I explain it, and they already know my reputation, that I'm going to do the best I can for our community. If I explain it, it's acceptable. And I think that to your point, it is the way which is communicated, because the schools can't get everything that they may want. We have constrained resources. But if it's explained and if it's just not being dogmatic, when it's communicated, I think that it goes a long ways in the way in which how we approach it. And some of the concerns that I've gotten is that it's in the approach in many regards. And then it's the lateness, it's delays, you know, it's the last minute. That's the kind of behaviors that have to be changed. We have to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. I just want to comment back on the whole RIA situation, because yes, I wholeheartedly believe it was Terry and his former chief of staff and their relationship with the state and what they were communicating to the state versus what RIA was trying to communicate to the state. And, you know, again, none of this is new, Leslie. So I hear you, because you are the newer superintendent coming in. You came right after the budget, or right in between the budget going to city council, that you may not have been aware, but certainly the chiefs and staff, that there have been folks here who were here for those things. But I just want to reiterate, I have all the memos. I will send them to you. There were memos, there were emails. I spoke with Betty Rosa too, and there were things, again, that were being presented by our previous administration to the state that led the state to have the beliefs that they had. I'm going to be doing some follow-up in the next couple of weeks with the state myself. I need to understand from the state's perspective how they see us supporting our multiple language learning students and our bilingual students if we don't have a program like RIA and we have an influx of new Americans and refugees coming into the area. And for me, it cannot be that the contingency plan is that we're just going to place students in other schools, and then those schools don't have the supports that they need to provide the proper bridge for those students. And where there is a program in a school that has those bridges already built in place to support students to get them where they need to get to go into a traditional school. And that was one of the reasons I supported even the bilingual academy in the very beginning when Hurricane Maria happened. I wasn't on the board when the board voted. I was actually in their meeting and session when they were having conversations, but I was not on the board. And then joined the board, and we didn't do that program appropriately and correctly. And 2 years later, I couldn't support it continuing because I don't want to support any program, even if it's for my own people, if it is not done appropriately. And then the end result is that our students are getting less than what they would have if we would have just put them in a school without the proper resources. So I say all that to say, again, I would like to be a part of those conversations. And Commissioner Vice President Elliott is the board liaison for that school. So absolutely request that she's also part of those conversations. And she and I had lengthy conversations last year around how we can work together to advocate for RIA moving forward as well. And so that advocacy work doesn't end just because the folks that were all here last year, including people at the state who may not even be here still, things have changed. So I think this is a time to revisit. Things have changed in our country. We have a new president as well, which is why we will probably see some more refugees coming back into our community, because for a time, there was some shortages and some things happening in the country. So I just want to reiterate that and stress, and I'm grateful that you're open to those conversations, and certainly will be more than happy to forward you not only the memos from the state, but the internal dialogues from myself, Vice President Elliott, the previous administration and staff that were here, so that you can see the history for itself. President White, is that a new hand?
No, it's not. Nope. I didn't raise my hand.
Seasoned hand, President White. It's seasoned.
Seasoned.
I don't think it's a seasoned hand either. So, so if there are no more additional questions to the budget book or section 5 for schools, that is going to conclude this portion of this meeting. But before I move on, there are two things I want to bring to the board's attention. One of them is that, Commissioner Powell, do you have a question before I continue?
Are you going to ask generally whether board members are ready to support this budget and what we need to support it if we're not there yet? Is that part of your plan to have that conversation?
No, not tonight, unfortunately. So,
well, then I'll just have to say it now because I don't want to be a surprise to anybody. But even though it doesn't fall into the schools portion, I'm not supportive of a move to outsource our bus drivers. I think that the Bente president is absolutely correct in that if we're having trouble finding bus drivers ourselves, then any company that we outsource those to is also going to have trouble, and they're going to charge a markup above the salary they pay to the drivers to be the intermediary there. So I would only support this budget if those positions are restored.
Okay. So I just want to, just for clarity, because there was a resolution to outsource that contract or a portion of transportation contract. I'm pretty sure I voted against it and you voted for it. So are you talking about vacant positions that are being proposed to be eliminated permanently? Because the outsourcing already happened, and I'm pretty sure you voted on that.
I understand that that wasn't an outsource, that was a contract, but I am talking about the vacant positions that my understanding is that they're vacant because we're having trouble hiring. And I do not believe that adding that load to one of our outstanding contracts is going to be certainly not going to be a cheaper option. So,
okay. I have brought that up, I think 2 deliberations ago. So I will say I do agree with you. I don't think those are vacant positions right now. The proposal right now is that they're completely eliminated. In the budget, it's my understanding that they are vacant and there were no dollar amounts to the vacancies attached to them, but that the proposal is to permanently eliminate them. And I do share the same concerns around permanently eliminating, even though they're not funded right now. Rebecca, did you have a question before because I do have some updates that I need to give. Yeah.
I wanted to just bring up what Commissioner Clark has brought up a couple of times. Just the initial presentation talked about changing or working on the pupil to teacher ratio. And I was wondering how that's illustrated best in the budget book, just because I'm not seeing any big shifts, and a lot of the pupil to teacher ratio on the per school pages are extremely similar to what was planned last year. So just because it was such a big part of the initial presentation, I was wondering if you could help me with that. Is that
Dr. Myers-Smalls, do you have a response to that?
I don't. I think I would have to follow up and find the appropriate person to respond.
Okay. Mr.
I'll
Adams,
submit it. Yeah. Sorry.
okay. No, it's okay, Rebecca. You know, I certainly can ask Elliott to put it in the board question log. Just a reminder for the community that the board question log and the responses from administration can be found at www.rcsdk12.org/budget. There you will find all of our round 1, round 2 questions, which commissioners ask questions, and our parents rep for finance has submitted lots of questions as well, and also administration's answers. So this Thursday is the final round of questions. So anything not answered here tonight will get documented there, in addition to any questions that any board members want to submit to our board clerk. But Commissioner Adams, did you have a question? I see your hand is up. Maybe it's not up.
I actually have a statement, and that's what a lot of people have had is statements more than questions. One statement is, first I want to give hats off to Van for admitting to upholding tradition that was not the effective thing to do. When he admitted that he had been prioritizing graduation rates instead of ELA, and he had been upholding that. And so I take my hat off to you for that, Van. Because that's what this board needs to know, that we are just as responsible. We're not separate from central office. This board has been responsible for a lot of stuff. And so we need to start there and do something different as a board to get some different results. Because what we've done in the past has not been effective. I would also like to say that I'd like to be able to see where students' voice is in regards to this budget. Third and final thing is I agree with Willow about the bus drivers, but I would be beside myself if I sat up here. I read the proposal coming from Dan, but there's no way that I could advocate for them without mentioning again the SSOs.
Commissioner Adams, you're breaking up.
They are the mentors. They got to wear so many hats. They're mentors. They're and I'm done.
Commissioner Adams, I'm sorry, we didn't capture the last section of what you were talking about because you broke up. Can you repeat that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, just the last part. We didn't catch it.
Okay. I agree with
you're still breaking up on Commissioner Adams. You're still breaking
about
up.
The bus drivers, but
okay.
Okay, hold on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, but you're gonna have to turn off the other one because it's gonna echo.
Okay. I agree with Commissioner Powell, but there's no way I'm gonna advocate for any bid day worker without advocating for the SS.
Kylie, I think you muted him by accident.
I was trying to mute the correct.
Hello. So that's all I was saying. I just had to give a shout out about the SSOs.
Okay.
All right.
So I think what Mr. Adams wanted to uplift is just his support for SSOs in the schools. And certainly, I think that is the conversation, Dr. Myers-Smalls, that we probably should have legitimately, because I do think with foundation aid increasing that there are ways to support all of our support staff, not only to increase wages, but also capacity to have them perhaps trained in restorative practices. But that conversation certainly could happen outside of this. But I know that Mr. Adams very strongly wants to support the SROs from the Bente unit as you know, individuals in our schools who our students do have good relationships with and do wear multiple hats. So he and I have had this conversation, so I will say that. So just two things to the entire board. Traditionally, you know, that the board memo last year.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yes.
I had raised my hand. I just want to make a brief comment. It's been raised. Yeah, I had raised it a while ago. Just very briefly, I don't know Superintendent Meyer small whether I would describe it as I would withhold my vote, but like Commissioner Powell, and I think I heard Commissioner LeBron say it as well, and Commissioner Adams, I have some concerns about how we are managing the very difficult environment that bus drivers, people with CDLs find themselves in. And I fear that the current approach is reflected in the budget might only exacerbate our very already existing challenge of finding competent, capable, committed drivers. So I would ask that you explore other options that would provide a different result in the budget. I don't have the specifics for that, but I just sense, Superintendent, that the way it is currently constructed in the budget will only exacerbate an already existing problem. And many of the drivers that we do have are city residents and people who contribute money to our local coffers when we hire or contract out. We don't know where these people live. We do know that many Bente employees, actually, I think if you look at the numbers, more Bente employees live in the city proportionally than any of our collective bargaining units. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So we want to create a budget that maximizes our opportunity to keep those jobs in the city, to keep those folks who otherwise might go elsewhere, keep them working for the Rochester City School District. Again, Superintendent, I don't have any answers for that, but and I'm not saying I wouldn't vote in favor of the budget, but I am really concerned, and I would ask that you take a second look at that and perhaps set up a meeting sometime in the near future, give us a response to how you think, if at all, you can remanage that challenge that everybody's having with these folks with CDL licenses. Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that my concerns about the current budget mirror those of President White and Commissioner Powell. Thank you.
Okay, so first and foremost, I think that I need to acknowledge that there is going to be a budget presentation that I anticipate, and I had a very brief conversation, very brief, with Dr. Meyer Smalls, because she and I were very busy today and we were not able to connect at some times throughout the day. So I just want to uplift that the state did send a memo to the administration and then met with the administration today to provide them with some technical support and guidance. President White did receive that letter on Friday, and I was hoping that President White would share it with the full board, so I'll make that request now, because I do think it outlines why we are going to see some changes in the budget. And so I did not want to take concerns tonight at the end of this last final deliberation, because I anticipate that our CFO will be presenting what those changes were going to be and which budget item lines you will see changes from what's being presented. And I just wanted to uplift that, because the budget that we were presented and that we have a draft of is not the budget that's going to City Council. And that I've never personally been in a situation. President White, can you mute yourself? Because I think I'm echoing off of you. Thank you. So that's one. Let me just put that out there. And then on Thursday, unfortunately, I'm double booked on Thursday. So let me just put that out there now. I did communicate with our staff about that. But I think on Thursday at the end of the evening, after the superintendent will give her presentation and some updates from her end, and our CFO gives some updates and presentations, that if there are concerns that you all want me to put in the final memo, I am meeting with staff the following week to draft that memo up and get it all to you all in the administration. But it is a very strange budget year. Let me just add that. And, you know, we started off but thinking that we were going to be financially way worse than where we have landed at. However, the state also wants to ensure that we are doing everything that we possibly can as a district to live within our means. And perhaps not be so dependent on CARE Acts to close the entire budget deficit. And I think that Carlene, I will say this, I think Carlene has found some ways to meet the request from the state, but allow us to still have a balanced budget without negative consequences, for lack of a better way to put it, because it will feel like negative consequences if we had to do it any other way. And Dr. Meyer-Smalls, I'm not sure if you want to comment on it any further, but certainly President White, I will ask you to forward that memo to the entire board.
The purpose of the letter and the meeting was just to provide technical assistance to the Rochester City School District, given just we've had, you know, financial difficulty in management, but just also given that we have different sources of revenue to make sure that they can give us the assistance and the support that we need moving forward. So it was a very collaborative and supportive meeting. Dr. Jallo was in attendance with Carlene and I, and they started the meeting by saying, "We are here to help." And I just certainly appreciate that. So they are providing that assistance and that support to make sure that we certainly have a budget that continues to move forward, that is, you know, structurally sound, but also to use the funds in ways that are going to accelerate certainly things that all of you are concerned about: graduation, reducing the reducing the demonstrable indicators 3 through 8, et cetera, that we need to look at all of those things. So it was a very collaborative and supportive meeting that lasted just a little under an hour today.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer-Smalls. So I just wanted the board to be aware, and certainly look forward to your presentation and our CFO's presentation. And then I think after that, hopefully Thursday night, President White, if at the end of the board meeting, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, that I can take the floor just to ask you all how you are all feeling after those presentations, and any questions you may have to the administration, and any feedback that you may have for the final memo. I would like to take that time on Thursday, even though traditionally we do it at the end of budget deliberations. There's just some alignment issues with how things also came out and have been moving, unfortunately, this year. Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, I just want to, after all of what I've said, and all of what I'm advocating for, that has to be in confines with what the state is requiring, what the state is recommending. And so that has to come first, that what the state is recommending, what the state monitor is recommending to the state, we have to make sure that we are aligning with that. So again, with all that I've said, we've got to make sure that what the state monitor is recommending to the state, what the state's directives are, that we are adhering to that. We don't have any other choice. And then everything else has to fall in line secondarily after ensuring that we are meeting the recommendations of the state. I just want to make sure that we as a board are prepared to adhere to that. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Shelley, I see that you jumped on. Did you want to give any feedback on the what's happening?
No, I thought the meeting, similar to your superintendent, I thought the meeting today was really very productive. I think it was done in the spirit of support and collaboration, but it also had a very serious tone in that you need to have a balanced budget, not a structurally balanced budget, but a fully balanced budget. And if that means adding and subtracting, wherever is appropriate, that is the case. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you see the outcomes in this school district that change the trajectory of some of those data points that we have been seeing over the last 10, 15 years, specifically how well are children learning to speak, write, and read English, how well they are demonstrating they're proficient in the areas of English and mathematics and science, how well they can demonstrate that they are college and career ready, and how well they can demonstrate, citizenry and civics and the other things, and that you are able to provide opportunities for them to have post-secondary opportunities. So the things happened so quickly this year in terms of when the plans came out and the budget process started. But based on the budget that you'll see on Thursday, I think a good earnest effort was made by the district and administration to do the things that were asked in each of the plans. But the reality is that if the budget is passed on June 30th, on July 1st, you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of work to do in the areas of academics. You have a lot of work to do in the areas of support for students and their families. And you have a lot of work to build some of your academic programs. That's the only way you're going to survive. That's the only way you're going to keep your students and build your student enrollment. And that's the only way you're going to attract the type of employees you want, the type of students you want, so that you can sustain and thrive as a district. So the commissioner and her team, and she had her whole team there, I think pretty much you would say, is there prepared to help you, particularly in the areas of facilities, operations, academics, and finance. And it's up to us to take advantage of that. And so I think it was a real opportunity, and I hope that everybody, in the earshot of what I'm saying, understands that that's what it was designed to be. But at the end of the day, I have to uphold you to what's in that academic plan, what's in that finance plan, which will probably have to be rewritten now that you have such an infusion of additional funds. And also, sorry about that, also to hold you accountable for the finance plan as well. And that's pretty much it. I look forward to Thursday. I think that's the day that you really see the final picture and can have some real deliberation about what you think you see in the budget and what you want to support moving forward as you take your budget to City Council.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo. Vice President Elliott, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just be clear about what we are going to see on Thursday. Does that mean that, is it for this particular budget cycle that we're going to see a structurally sound budget, or are we talking about in succeeding budget cycles? Is that what I can expect, that the board can expect, that on Thursday? And I'm talking about aside from the infusion of resources that we've gotten.
So thank you for that question. I don't know if it's for me, but it's my expectation that on Thursday you will be seeing a structurally sound, balanced budget, because in the letter that Commissioner LeBron referenced, you now have a specific date by which the commissioner and her team are asking to see this, and which is Friday, April 23rd. So the administration, it's my expectation, and I think they're well prepared to do so, will be sharing with you a structurally sound, balanced budget on Thursday.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Powell, I see your hand is up as well.
Yeah, this is also on the same topic. So I hope that what we're going to see presents all the pluses and minuses, so that we don't have to go through an entire budget book to reconcile the proposal.
So Commissioner Powell, actually, thank you for bringing that up, because my request to administration on top of their presentation is to provide the board with a summary perhaps even just a bulleted point of areas that were, moved, or budget item lines that were impacted and why. And I don't think it needs to be the entire budget book and everything's highlighted where all the, yes, I want to see where all the changes were at, but I want a summary of it. And I know that there's going to be a presentation, but even if we can have just a one pager as well to accompany that presentation so that we can follow along. Again, as Dr. Jallo mentioned, these changes do have to go to the state by Friday, which is she mentioned the 23rd, and that's Friday. So it will be presented to this board Thursday. It's going to go to the state Friday. And it's my understanding that the state also would have to give it the green, the thumbs up. But then we also have to move forward with the board memo and then transmitting it over to City Council. So I do recognize that the state recognizes that we do have to move it over to City Council. And so there are changes that they're requesting that it would need to be done before it gets transmitted over to City Council. And again, this is an entirely newer process for myself and for, I believe, all of you, because we have not had a state appointed monitor and the states give input on a budget. We also have never had an infusion of cash from CARES Act with 3 different buckets. We just have never been in this position. And so I just want to be clear that we have no history of being in this position before. We've never lived through this before, and our community has not experienced this before. And I know that for the community side of things, it is very confusing. And I just want to acknowledge it's confusing for myself as the chair of finance, but also certainly it's going to be confusing for all of you as we're going through this. And certainly Shelley is a good supporter, and we can all tap into her as commissioners to ask questions and clarifying things. And I know that it's new for our CFO and our superintendent. Like, we are all living this together as a new experience and trying our best to navigate through it. So I just ask that the community is fully aware that, I just became aware of this today. But that I'm aware that our board president and our CFO and our superintendent were actually only made aware Monday at the end of the day. So it's not like they knew for weeks that this was coming down the pipeline. They just found out, and they had to respond and set up meetings and figure out some things and respond very quickly. So I know that's all I can say. I feel the frustration of like trying to navigate this, but we're all doing the best that we can. And certainly, the goal is to produce a fiscally sound budget and make sure that we're being fiscal stewards. And hopefully you all see the letter and have an opportunity to read the memo from the state commissioner and have a better understanding from that memo what the expectation is. President White?
Yes, as Commissioner LeBron has indicated, we just got the letter yesterday. As you all know, I don't mind saying in the public sphere, my family has been struggling with COVID. My household family has been struggling with COVID. So I'm a little bit behind on my email, and I apologize for that, but I just got it yesterday, and I'll make sure you get it tonight. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, President White. I'm sorry about your family with COVID. So Thursday, again, President White, my request will be at the end of the board business meeting. If we can, maybe under new business, just set aside 5-10 minutes so that I can check in with all of the board members on where they're at with what was presented. If, and certainly, they can ask questions as is happening, the presentations, but I would like at that time to then see where folks are at with the budget and how they feel about how we need to move forward.
That makes perfect sense. As they said in Star Trek, Kaya, make it so. Kaya will make sure it's on the agenda.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you all know why I'm doing it that way and why I was not asking tonight. I wanted to. That was the original plan to okay, let me check in with everybody. And then I got thrown that wrench earlier today and just trying to figure it out. Commissioner Adams?
Wanted to request of you, Commissioner LeBron, for us to have just one moment of silence for the George Floyd family. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Powell, is that a no hand?
It must be.
Okay. So I don't know if we have any executive session items tonight. No, thank you, Dr. Myers. I think we do on Thursday. But with that, I'm going to conclude tonight's meeting. Thank you all. It's 8:13 p.m.
You have the Finance Committee agenda items.
Oh yes, we have finance tonight. Look at me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was ready to conclude. Okay. My apologies. We do have finance. I thought we just had a budget deliberation, but we added budget deliberations to the Finance Committee. So with that said, where's our CFO? Carlene, are you ready to start?
I am, and I promise this will be fast tonight. So
Okay.
there's
no, it's okay. And then Kalia, do you have her presentation to?
She's gonna speak to the financial report. I have it ready. Do you want to just accept the minutes really quickly before you go?
Actually, can I get a motion for the minutes?
Second.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Arlene, let me know when you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay.
And like I said earlier, I promise this will be fast tonight. There's going to be two major areas just to focus in on. It's all good news. We will, as always, go right to the cash flow. You're going to see the positive impact there. So again, Kalia, if you could take us to that typical cash flow page, the next one. There you go. Next one down. Yes. Okay. So again, our March financials are showing, again, the actual cash flow at the end of March. And so what you're going to see there, again, when we're looking at March year over year, a significant improvement in the cash flow. And again, this is a continuation of the impact that COVID has had on the school district. When you take a look at the far right-hand side of this presentation or this document, moving all the way over to June. Can you go a little bit over, Elliott? Thank you. You're going to see, again, a significant increase in that June projection of 184.9 million. And so, again, when you compare that to where we were a year ago in June, at about approximately 120 million, you'll recognize, again, the positive impact that we have had on cash flow. Again, this represents times that are not normal operations, so we have to keep that in mind. And I will say that in speaking with my team, who's been around for a number of years, this is the first time in over 17 years that our cash flow has reached that level. So I just wanted to make you aware of it. And again, keep in mind that this is not normal business operations. You will notice at the top of this document, though, that we are at 0% reduction in state aid payments and any future state aid payments. And that means that we have met our obligation for the year we are whole. So you won't have that additional sheet in here showing it 5, 10, 20%, whatever. We are in good shape to finish off the rest of the school year from a liquid cash flow standpoint. So the other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention this evening, and that is that you will have on Thursday a resolution before you for a budget transfer. That budget transfer exceeds the $500,000 level that was recently established within our budget transfer policy. And that transfer is in the, there will be again a resolution to move that forward on Thursday night. The amount of that transfer is 1.4 million, and it is for the purpose of a payment of a litigation suit. And so if anyone has any questions, other than that, the finances are in good standing for the March 31st month ended year over year.
I do have a question.
Yeah, I was just about to call Commissioner Powell and then Commissioner Vice President Elliott.
To what you just said, Ms. Pierce, the settling a lawsuit, is this from funds that were budgeted, or do we need to access the insurance committed reserve fund?
Right. So if you take a look at the very last sheet in your packet, there is it shows you where the budget transfer is occurring. And I realize that this is something new for most folks this evening. So on that document, it will show you where the money is moving from and where the money is moving to. So in this particular case, it's coming out of an account called the Appropriation for Deficit Reduction. That is telling all of us that that money was not budgeted. This was unanticipated for this fiscal year. And so we were fortunate that we had that money in that account to be able to take care of this claim at this time. So it was not a budgeted expense. It's an unplanned budget expenditure.
Okay, I do want to take this opportunity to let folks know these are exactly the circumstances for which we have committed fund reserves. Same with, for instance, workers' comp. If our payout in workers' comp actually exceeds the budget, one of the remedies we have at our disposal is to make an appropriately sized withdrawal from the committed fund balance and then restore balances in the subsequent year. That's what those funds are for. And so if you've decided that there's a resource within the current budget that's not otherwise being used, that's fine. But I just have this sense, because the resources haven't been used over these many years that we've had committed funds, that people don't realize that that's exactly what they're there for.
You're correct. It's a business decision as to whether or not we use funds within the general fund, or we would tap into the money that has been set aside. So in this particular year, given our strong status at this point in time, the decision was made to use the general funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Elliott.
Thank you. So currently, how much money do we have in the general fund, in our funds? Because that's an issue where we need to improve upon. And how much money, I didn't ask this during the budget deliberation, but how much money is being projected to be included in our funds?
Okay, so thank you for that question. For this coming close to this school year, we are currently still working on those projections. At this point in time, I can safely say that it's looking at approximately $90 million. So I do appreciate you asking that question.
Okay, that's for the 21-22 budget?
2021 year end, because we have to calculate how much money we have left over at the end of this year. And again, because of the impact of COVID, that then becomes whatever's left over is then considered to be our year end fund balance. That's then placed in the CAFR, and then a decision is made as to how that money will be allocated going into reserves, such as Commissioner Powell had referenced earlier. And then we make that decision, present it to the board for consideration. The board makes their motion as to whether to approve or change that recommendation. And then we close out the year end. The actual money that will be used in the 21-22 school year budget is that appropriated fund balance amount that we've been talking about, which is $33,100,000. And that is absolutely has stayed the same within that budget proposal. And it will be the same even again when you have that final budget amount on Thursday. That has not changed.
So the minimum amount, what does our policy say around the fund balance? I think we made some changes to the policy. What's the percentage of funding that we have to have in the fund balance?
So it depends on, and again, this was just recently passed. And what we had was the discussion as to whether it's going to be at the GFOA recommendation, if it's going to be at a 5% minimum. And so I know that Commissioner Powell has requested again that a resolution be reviewed Thursday night. So I think there's more discussion that is still to be had, and we will continue to move forward with that discussion.
But currently for 2021, we'll have $90 million.
We will
available.
have, it's what we need to remember is that this is a projected amount. So we make business decisions to end the school year. And so we have to take a look at what we have. We will continue to monitor our fund balance from here on out. We will continue. We've made an absolute promise to deliver that amount to you at each finance committee meeting from here on out, to keep you right up to date with what that is looking like. But right now we can safely say that it's approximately $90 million.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. I also just want to uplift that I asked Carlene to also show with a graph what she just presented on that, because this Thursday will be our first time actually utilizing the new budget transfer policy that the board just passed recently. So this will be our first time ever going through that process of doing a budget transfer in the form of a resolution that's going to come before the board to vote. And when you see the amount and you'll see that resolution, we didn't have a chance to review it in advance, so we'll see it. And this is tied right back into why she is making this request to transfer these funds over. So I just want to put that out there because you'll see that on Thursday through a resolution.
Commissioner LeBron, may I say something? So we've taken a proactive stance on this budget transfer policy as well, recognizing that we do not want to hold up any business transactions. In this particular case, we are obligated, obviously, to make this payment in a timely manner. You should not have rushes coming to you again. I've asked my team to take a look at what we've done historically with regard to budget transfers at this time of the year and finishing through the end of the school year. And so my team is taking a look at that and then making a recommendation to me as far as what budget transfers we know we're going to have at this point in time, and they'll be delivered to you in a more timely manner.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So thank you for that explanation to the board too, because again, they're going to see a resolution, and I know we're trying out new things to review resolutions in advance. And we do have some April, some resolutions that were emailed to everyone. And Kalia, can you pull those up as well? It's not a lot of resolutions, so this will be the time to review and ask any questions that you may have.
Beatrice, did you ask for a motion to approve the financial report?
No, not yet, but if you want to make that motion, you sure
Yeah,
can.
I can do that now.
Yep, thank you. And can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Resolutions 768. So if anybody has any questions on this one, this is a final payment resolution for work that has been done. Okay.
I make a motion for approval.
No, we're just reviewing them, Commissioner.
Oh, that's for Thursday.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. 770. If anybody has any questions on this resolution. Commissioner Powell, is that a new hand or an old hand?
No, old hand.
Okay.
I do. I have one thing. In the packet, I also sent some supporting documentation for Resolution 770 from Chief Schmidt. He wanted to ensure that the board was aware that that there was a executive summary that was submitted, and also has the cost analysis of this as well in there. So the packet that you received for this evening has that information in there if you'd like to review.
Yes, thank you for that, Kalia. And then there is, I believe, one more resolution, which is a settlement of claim. And so anybody has any additional questions about this one, I do believe it would require us to go into executive session. Steve, am I correct on that assumption? If there are questions related to this resolution?
Yeah, if there's specifics about the substance of the underlying case, we can discuss that in executive session. If there's any procedural questions about the resolution itself, we can talk about it now.
Perfect, thank you. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. I don't have a question about this one. I was wondering, wasn't there a resolution, an additional resolution added, resolution 745? Or is that for a different?
I think that's for different. This is for next. Yeah.
Okay, I thought that there had been an additional resolution added for this meeting.
Oh no, this one, these set of resolutions are for May's business meeting.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, it's okay. So this is why it's confusing. So we're trying to review resolutions a month in advance. We are getting a new resolution Thursday and related to the budget transfer, but it's our first time having that resolution related to the budget transfer. Hopefully we can at least get it by tomorrow evening so everyone can at least review it. But I did ask our CFO, Carlene, to present that information tonight, and it's going to be related to that resolution. But that's what our CFO was also mentioning, that she's going to be a little bit more proactive with her team about all of the budget transfers that are done historically around this time, so that she can present it a little bit more time for us to digest through a resolution, so we can do it all at once, but have an understanding of what we're approving for these budget transfers. So if there are no questions on this one, and again, if there, like our legal mentioned, if we have some questions that are related to the details of the case, then it would have to go into executive. Anything around the resolution or language in general can be had in open session. Kali, I think that was the last resolution for review for next month.
Yes, it was.
And then I think I'm going through my agenda on this screen over here, and
there's also the change order report.
Yep, I see that. The change order report for January through March 2021. Are you pulling that up, Kalia?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Carlene, do you want to present this, or do you want to just see if anybody has any questions?
Actually, it would be Mike that would present this.
Mike. Does anybody have any questions for Mike related to this? I don't see any questions.
Good evening, Commissioner LeBron.
Good evening, Mike. You got lucky tonight. There's no questions on this change order report.
I live life right on the edge.
Okay, and then with that, thank you, Kalia. I'm just gonna go straight into new business, and I just have one item for new business.
Can you do a motion to forward?
Oh, yes. Can I get a motion to advance the quarterly change order report?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Thank you, Ms. Adams. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Did you get it, Kalia?
Yes.
Thank you. One last new business item. A few weeks ago, I know that Commissioner Powell has a resolution on the OPEB resolution, OPEB, and that I made a request to all of the commissioners and our board staff to start scheduling meetings in groups with the state auditors. I don't know if all the board members had an opportunity to do that, but if you did, thank you for taking that time out to hear from the state auditors directly, just some of their concerns. I do want to uplift that their concern is not that we shouldn't have conversations around OPEB and you know, have a conversation around the amount we want to set aside. Their concerns is the fact that they do not, I wrote down my feedback, but I just want to bring it up here because one of the things when I made the request was that administration and our state monitor be included in some of those meetings, which with our team of 2 and 3 from the commissioners, and somehow they were not a part of any of the meetings. And so I still very much would like them to meet with the state auditors, but I am requesting that there are 2 commissioners perhaps who are a little bit more neutral to the conversation also be a part of that so that we are all hearing the same thing, because I think there's still a little bit of miscommunication happening. So not to put anybody on the spot, but Commissioner Clark and Vice President Elliott or President White, I was going to be requesting, if you all don't mind, to have those meetings along with our state monitor and our superintendent. I've already talked with the superintendent and our superintendent, our state monitor, so that we are following some of the recommendations and why they're making those recommendations. So my meeting was with Commissioner Adams, and I think he and I had some good conversations with our state auditors and a better understanding of why it should be under the fund balance policy and why we actually need to revisit the fund balance policy, and also why it shouldn't be under a resolution. So that is my request, and Commissioner Clark and President White and Vice President Elliott, you know, I'd love to hear your feedback on it, but I do know that our superintendent and our state monitor unfortunately did not get scheduled, and very much so want to hear directly as well from the state auditors. Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, my meeting with the was really good too. And I'll share with the general public what came out of it. Mr. Winkler's recommendation that we move some of the guidelines that have been posted in various resolutions going back years be codified in policy. I had come to that same conclusion myself. And had put together a PowerPoint that was available to board members last month, but we didn't talk about it. It's been uploaded to board docs, and I don't know if Kalia shared it by email or not, but if you don't want to read the whole thing, you just go to the final slide and see that it is my recommendation, and the comptroller endorses it, that we go back to the policy and take all of the language that has over time defined the guidelines or the guidance for the dollar ranges of policies of the committed funds and translate it into policy language. So I am wholeheartedly in support of that course of action. I'll just remind folks that we were under a hard deadline to amend the policy, the fund balance policy, as a result of the state monitor's recommendations. We did that, but that didn't mean we did the best job we could. So it's always appropriate to go back to policy when we see that there's more work to be done.
Thank you, Vice President. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I was about to call you Vice President Powell, but Commissioner Malloy.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I had a great meeting yesterday with Mr. Winkler. I was with Commissioner Clark in the meeting, and they provided a great deal of clarification over everything. And so I just really appreciated having the opportunity to meet with them. One of the questions I had asked was specifically, should this be via resolution or via our policy? And so he had recommended, or at least this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Clark, I came away with the understanding that he was recommending that we codify things both with the policy itself and with a resolution.
Commissioner Clark and then President White.
Yes, I was going to basically say the same thing that Commissioner Malloy just indicated. Had a great meeting, and the state auditor did indicate that we should move the policy to fund balance, but he also indicated that it's okay to move forward with a resolution.
So I just want to clarify, and this is why I do want another meeting with the state auditor, with the administration and Dr. Jallo. So with the resolution, you know, what my understanding, and I took lots of notes and I have conversations all the time with Dan, and he's always very supportive of this district, our state auditors. So let me uplift them for taking the time out of their schedule. You know, they are the auditors for all the districts, not just us, but they always do take the time out for us, is that we figure out whether it's going to be like the 2 months of expenditures and figure out the language of that piece, but that a resolution is then brought forth after the board has had the conversation of what they want to commit this year to OPEB, and that it matches with what the percentage or range we have in the policy. So my understanding was not that we move forward with a resolution right now. It was that we update the policy and then as a board come to a decision as to what we want to commit through a resolution. But that if we just did it through a resolution only, it gets lost. There's no way to have any accountability to that. So I just want to clarify that piece. But again, Commissioner Clark, I am going to ask either you, President White, and Vice President Elliott, if it could be both or three, but with the administration, so that at least they are also hearing the same information and we can kind of get on the same page as an entire district on this issue.
I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you. President White?
Absolutely.
Thank you as well.
Did
So
you
I
need,
think, yes, Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, did you need both the president and myself, or either or?
I would say either or. I didn't know what either or availability would be. So I think what I'll do
President White is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kalia, can you work with Dr. Jallo and Dr. Meyer Smalls and President White and Commissioner Clark and Dan? And Dan, if you're watching, we're going to reach back out and request one more meeting. One more meeting, Dan, so we can all make sure we're on the same page here. And then we can take whatever steps we need to as a board to update the policy and align the recommendations, and then figure out what that resolution would look like as a board as we decide what the percentage amount would be for this year. And I think throughout the policy, we could potentially even put in the policy, require ourselves to have this conversation every year to, you know, early on, to understand what the percentage would be year to year, depending on where we're at fiscally. And Commissioner Vice President Elliott and President White, are those new hands?
I just wanted to say something that's off topic before we go.
Okay, yep, so I'm wrapped up with that. We have a plan moving forward. So Vice President Elliott.
I'm just looking on Facebook and I see that we got a birthday in the audience. Dr. Shirley Green's got a birthday. So just happy birthday to Dr. Shirley Green. Let me put up my reaction things.
You beat me to the punch, Vice President Ellis. You stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But happy birthday to Dr. Green.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Yeah.
And I spent it all day, my whole day with RCSD.
Dr. Green.
That's not necessarily a birthday present.
Dr. Green, the best part of the back half of the birthday song is "How old are you now?"
Don't go there.
I know, I didn't want to do that.
Thank you all, though.
Happy birthday. And I'm sorry it happened to fall on a budget deliberation. Any other meeting, I'm sure you could have not been here, but unfortunately, but your presence is appreciated, and I hope you do get to celebrate your birthday in a real way, not tonight.
Thank you.
So thank you. So I have no other new business, and that is going to conclude the finance meeting. We have no executive session topics tonight. We're a little over time. However, it was an interesting meeting. So thank you all and have a good night. And I'm not sure if we're doing a survey, but I see Leslie, you have your hand up. Yes, Dr. Myers-Small.
I do. Two things from me. I just certainly wanted to acknowledge Sheila Webster, as this is her last board meeting as a school chief, and just wanted to thank her significant contributions to the scholars and the staff, not only at School 58, but across the district. And we thank you so much. We celebrated Mrs. Webster earlier, but I just wanted to acknowledge you in front of the commissioners and the public to thank you for your service. And I know she wouldn't want this type of attention, but I would be remiss if I didn't do that. So thank you, Sheila, Chief Sheila Webster, for your significant contributions. We appreciate you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It's truly my
You're
honor.
welcome. And then the second thing, tomorrow is Administrative Professionals Day. And so we just, on behalf of certainly our commissioners and myself and the cabinet and the district, we want to thank all those in our district who serve in that role so humbly and graciously, and they keep many things off of our plates. And so just wanted to lift that up and acknowledge our administrative professionals tomorrow.
Thank you.
Hmm.
So the board survey is up.
And then after, I do want to ask President White if he can call for an adjournment formally. Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, Kalia, let me know when we're all set.
Just waiting on 2 more.
My phone is about to die, so I hope it's.
All right, go ahead.
All right, all I need is that good old fashioned motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Was that Vice President Elliott?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All those in favor say good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Night, everyone.
Have a nice night. Be safe.